today, our main objectives are to become familiar with Brandon's skills, his needs and his interests. And then we're also going to receive a really super brief, kind of like a crash course overview of behavior analysis in that and in problem behavior itself. Right? So we're going to figure out where problem behavior kind of comes from and what we can do in order to kind of reduce that. And part of that, and a big part of that, is teaching skills by building skills and really promoting overall independence. All right, so first let's talk a little bit about Brandon. Some of his likes, dislikes. Dr. Hayes, please chime in if there's something that could be helpful. So Brandon enjoys watching Disney movies. He likes interacting and engaging with people. You can see the people that he enjoys or that he likes the company of or that have good rapport with him. When they enter the room, he's lighting up. He's so happy when people that have developed a rapport with him and have worked at it. You can just see how much better his life got because that person is now there. And he likes relaxing. I think we all do. Right? So this could be a good list for me too. I like Disney movies, interacting and engaging with people, and I like relaxing too. So he's also really skilled with communicating wants and needs. He has a really awesome verbal repertoire. He does a really great job of really trying to communicate with people. And he's really good at understanding first-then statements. So one of his biggest strengths is understanding that if you say, first, we're going to clean your room, then it's going to be dinner time. Right? So as soon as he's done with cleaning the room, he knows, oh, dinner's after this, right? So that's a skill that not a lot of people have. So we use that as an asset when developing treatment for him. Dr. Is there anything else that
Nope.
been relevant? All right, cool. All right. So what are we working on with him? All right, so Brandon is working on being more independent with his hygiene skills, such as toileting, showering, brushing teeth, all that kind of stuff, completing household tasks, completing vocational tasks. Right? Those last two are really important because our goal is not for Brandon to be safe, happy, just in the area that we're about to move him to. The goal is to move him toward more independence, toward more job opportunities, toward more independent living. So our goal is never to, let's keep him safe, let's find out what he can do, and then maybe just kind of work on maintaining those skills. Our goal is always to get him to that next level of independence, next level of skills. And then when we get there, what do we do next?
Keep going.
Keep going, just keep going forward, right? So we just keep moving him in the direction that will bring him gainful employment, that will bring him more independent living.
I just wanted to add here, Victor, that what you're describing are a lot of skills that he had and that he lost. And a couple of you, I think all of you have seen a video of him when he was kind of himself. He's had a job, he's done a lot of things. It's been a very tough year and a half for him. So all the things that Victor is talking to you about is to get him back there, but then I don't think we've ever seen how high is high. And so we want to get him to that next level after that. First stabilize, trust again, because he's been in a tough situation, and then get those basic skills back, and then the sky's the limit after that.
I think, Chanel, right? I think what you were saying was correct, just completely on point, where people don't expect a lot from him, or they let him get away with not doing the full task, or they let him get away with not doing a task at all. And then he's learning, oh, cool, I don't have to do this. So if I don't do it, like if I work with him and I say, you don't have to do this task in its entirety, then when Chanel's working with him next, he's gonna be like, well, Victor didn't make me, so I'm not gonna do it with you either.
That's
so,
behavior analysis.
Yep, yep. So the overall point of that, and I think that you were kind of like skirting around this, is don't subject Brandon to the tyranny of lowered expectations, okay? He's able to do a lot of this stuff. Expect more of him, okay? Because the second that we put lowered expectations, he's going to deteriorate, just like any of us would. If someone came to me and gave me food and just handed money to me while I'm just laying in bed, guess who's not going to work anymore?
I know that's right.
Right? Why would I need to? Because I'm already getting all this awesome stuff for doing nothing, right? But getting up, going to work, I'm improving myself. I worked on being more independent living, right? So we should still be working on that with Brandon as well. So I like to break up trainings into kind of overall themes that all kind of tie together. Okay? So the first thing that we're going to go over is building rapport. So how exactly do you develop a relationship with them, and how important is it? So clearly we've talked about the importance of developing a relationship. We talked about how Brandon lights up when he's talking or when someone enters the room that he has a good rapport with. So why is it important? How do you develop that? Then we're going to talk about understanding and responding to problem behavior. And part of that is going to be an overview of how behavior develops and the kind of philosophy and concepts of behavior analysis. We're going to talk about gaining compliance, and I don't mean like a rigid, you're going to do exactly what I say. I mean, how are we interacting with Brandon in a way that is therapeutic and is going to get him to maybe not even realize that you're presenting a demand to him, right, or instruction. And lastly, and it's going to be the biggest chunk of today, is going to be communication skill building. And the reason that they're the biggest chunk is because they're really, really, really important. It's not good enough just to reduce problem behavior. Right? So if Brandon's not engaging in self-injury or his vocal outbursts, but he's just sitting around doing nothing, he doesn't have any skills, are we moving him toward that more independent, more gainful employment? Absolutely not. So it's not good enough just to treat problem behavior. We also need to work on building his skills. All right, so first we're going to talk about building rapport. So rapport, this is probably the hokiest thing, but as defined in the dictionary, is a close and harmonious relationship with the people or groups in which the people or groups concerns understand each other's feelings, ideas, and communicate well. Does everybody else have a different idea about what rapport is? It's pretty on the nose, right? So for Brandon, clearly it's not necessarily understanding each other's feelings. It's more than that. So rapport could best be described just by asking you guys a question. How do you feel when someone that you have a good rapport with is with you? Feel good, right? What about if you're going out with friends, going to a movie, going out to dinner, and then you find out this guy who you're best friends with, you have a really, really great rapport, is coming with you? How does it make you feel? Good, right? The outing's going to be more fun because they're there. So when you're thinking about whether or not you have a good rapport with Brandon, consider when he sees that he's working with you, when you enter the room and he knows for the next several hours, I'm going to be working with John, is my life going to get better? Has John associated his presence with things that I really, really like? Or is John going to make me do a bunch of work? Maybe he's not going to talk in a friendly tone to me. I assume you wouldn't. But is John not really all that fun? He kind of talks to me in a bland tone, makes me do a lot of stuff. And not a lot of fun stuff comes along when John's here, right? Not that much fun. But if John comes in, I'm like, oh, sweet, John's here. Last time we played this really fun game. He took me out to the park. We had a really awesome lunch. He's interacting with me the whole time. When I communicate with him, he's getting me the stuff that I need, right? Is Brandon like John if that's the John that shows up? Yeah, absolutely. And then the next time John comes, is Brandon excited? Absolutely, because John has been associated with all this awesome stuff.
Now I have to do a good job.
Well, it's really important, especially in the beginning, to establish that. So in the beginning, when we are building rapport, right? For those of you that have some background in ABA, we call this pairing with reinforcement, right? So or pairing. In those early interactions, it's all about what Brandon enjoys, and we want to make it available to him. So we want to place as little instruction on him as possible, as little demands, right? So we don't want to show up and all of a sudden, boom, you have to do like clean the kitchen, you have to clean the bathroom, you have to make your bed, back to back to back to back. Because then next time you show up, what's Brandon thinking? This person's just going to come over and just give me a bunch of demands. I'm not happy to see him at all, right? So we should start with low demand, high reward, especially in the beginning, okay? And then we can slowly fade in those demands, right? So that way he's not even realizing that, wow, all of a sudden we're spending half the time working on goals and building my skills and half the time doing fun activities, right? So if you build them in one by one by one by one, he's not even realizing that you guys are doing as much work as you're actually doing.
You can make games out of that too.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, if he's making his bed, you can make that a game and laugh or say a joke with him, you know, and then he'll just want to do it because it doesn't feel like a chore.
Absolutely, right? Or if he ends up getting something really awesome afterward, right? So we call that PMAC principle, where if I make the bed, then I get some awesome food, right? So I make the bed, then I get a soda, right? And I'm like, yeah, making the bed doesn't seem so bad because soda's gonna come afterward. You wanna keep demands to a minimum, if none at all. And give those rewarding activities. Again, so that way Brandon knows next time, when you guys are here, his life's getting better. Then when you include one demand later on down the line, he's not even realizing it. He's like, oh cool, you guys are here, this is gonna be awesome. I have to do one little thing, I have to make my bed, totally fine, because I know all this other really awesome, rewarding stuff is gonna accompany it.
I know with one of my old jobs, like with one of my clients, she was younger, but it's the same thing with her. Her biggest thing was like getting close to people because like she had a lot of family issues. So my supervisor, that was my first thing, like for the first like 3 or 4 sessions, that was specifically, don't work on the specific behavior plan, work on getting to know her, knowing what she likes. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we should be doing here, so that's awesome. And this is shown in the literature to be the most effective way to develop a relationship. You know, it might seem weird, you're not working on any goals in the beginning, but in the long run, for long-term behavioral stability, long-term skill building, you know, Brandon's gotta like you.
Right.
Brandon's gotta like you in order to follow your instruction. If he knows that instruction is coming from this person, I like this person, right? So I like them, I'll follow the instruction, and afterward, we get to do something really fun, right? So I'm learning, I'm building my skills with this really awesome person, and this really awesome thing is happening afterward. Does it seem so bad? Not really. All right, so how should demands be introduced? Should we go none in the beginning, all at once when rapport has been established? Start at the target amount first, so if you have 5 goals, you run all 5 of them during your session, or very few in the beginning, then slowly introduced. C, right? So very few in the beginning. Right. And then there's another really awesome article that goes a little bit more in depth if you guys are interested. That's also a really awesome site, bsci21.org. So behavioral sciences for the 21st century. So there's a lot of really cool stuff in there. All right, so we're going to do an activity. Get 2 volunteers, please. You guys can be sitting next to each other, although it's not necessary.
Yeah, I'll volunteer.
All right, thank you, John. Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
Good.
All right, so I picked the most random thing I could from my office. All right, so I want you guys to determine who's going to be the person served.
Person served.
Sorry, who's going to be Brandon? That's a bank cross. Okay, cool. So, I'm sorry, what was your name again?
Iguana.
Iguana, all right. So, I would like for you to engage with John using that object.
No.
Okay? So we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it for 30 seconds.
Alright, John, can you tell me what this object is?
A Glade smell good thing. I forget what they're called. Air freshener.
Can you tell me what shape it is?
Like an egg.
Can you tell me what other objects are kind of shaped like this?
An egg.
Can you like open this for me?
And that's what he'd probably do.
Oh, okay.
Smell it, smell it.
Okay. All right. Thank you guys. Round of applause.
Yay.
Good. Nice job. All right. So when we're thinking about those early interactions, what is the one thing we want to avoid? Remember, we want high reward, low demand, right? So I think one of the natural things that we want to do when we're interacting with someone is ask them a lot of questions. But keep in mind, those questions require a response from John, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're asking Brandon a lot of questions, he's got to do something. So what is that technically? It's technically a demand, right? So during those 45 seconds, you had 5 demands and then 0 praise statements. Okay? So when you're interacting, kind of be cognizant of that. So we're going to go over a little something we call 0 demand engagement. So it's a little weird, it's a little awkward, and it's not the way that we normally speak, which makes it so difficult. But when we're building rapport, we got to be careful about asking questions like, how was your day? Hey, what color is this? What shape is this? Because all of those things are technically demands, right? So then if you're interacting with Brandon, and then all of a sudden you see some problem behavior, well, I was just asking how his day was. Well, that was actually technically a demand, right? So that self-injury could be a way of saying like, oh, you're giving me too much instruction right now. Okay? So how exactly do we do this? Well, firstly, one of the things that we can do is we can give praise. And praise is complimenting appropriate behavior, right? Not complimenting the absence of problem behavior. Excuse me. So which one of these do we want to say? Do we want to say, you're doing a great job not scratching me? Or do we want to say, I love your nice calm hands? B, right? So if I ask you guys, don't think of a pink elephant, what's the first thing that you think of?
Pink
Yeah, exactly. So if I'm saying, you're doing a great job not scratching me, what did I just bring right to the forefront?
To scratch.
Right, I just set the occasion for him to be like, oh, well, I'll show you what not scratching is, right? So we want to compliment what's going well, not compliment what's absent, okay? So this goes with anything. So we don't want to say, I love how you're not hitting yourself right now. I love how you're not engaging in self-injury. Say, I like your nice calm hands. I love how nicely you're walking. You're sitting so nicely right now, right? Keep it positive. Next, we could also reflect. So we can repeat or paraphrase what the individual says. Brandon often says, I love mommy when she's going to come visit, which is awesome. So when that happens, we'll often paraphrase what he says, like, oh, you love mom, that's so sweet. She's going to be here in a little bit, right? So especially toward the end of the day when she's going to be coming in. If he's commenting on what's going on, if he is coloring with you and he picks up a red crayon and he says red, say, that is a red crayon. Great job, Brandon. So you can paraphrase, you can repeat what he says, reflect, and actually show that you're engaged with him. Saying, I am hearing what you're saying, I'm going to repeat it back to you, and then give you a compliment about how well you identified that thing. Next, we can do imitation, right? So if Brandon's coloring a picture, what should you be doing? You should be coloring with him, absolutely. So you guys could be doing the same exact thing, so that way you are definitely engaged with him. If he's reading a book with you, you're right there with him reading the same book. All right? Next, we could describe. So like a sports announcer, you can describe the activity. Brandon, you're coloring that picture really well. Look, it's a frog. Look this slogan. It's got red. You know what else is red? Those are like kind of Christmas colors. There's a Christmas bow in there. Christmas is my favorite season. And I get a lot of presents during Christmas time, right? So no demands within that. I'm just describing what I'm seeing, making connections. And then maybe if some of that jives with Brandon, he's going to contribute to it. So if I'm listing all this other stuff, saying how great it is that there's Christmas colors on here, it looks like there's snow, that's a type of weather, it's rainy today, you know, that's another type of weather. I don't really like when it's raining, right? So you can talk for a long time just based on this one little thing. You can string these things together and engage with him without presenting those demands or asking him to do something. So I'm simply pointing out different aspects of this, making connections to other things, and then seeing maybe he wants to contribute to something like that. Right? And lastly, enjoy yourself. Right? So be happy. So actually be happy, engaged in the activity that you're both participating in. All right. So if you're thinking, if only there was some sort of acronym in order to remember how to do this, PRIDE. So praise, reflect, imitate, describe, and enjoy, or enjoyment. Alright, so do you guys want to try that one more time? Do you guys want to switch?
Yeah. You want to switch? You don't like?
Okay.
Alright.
Alright, I will. Alright, and go.
Hey man, this smells so good. This smells like Christmas.
Smells good.
Yeah, Christmas is my second favorite holiday. I love Easter because there's ham, and I love ham. You know what that color outside ham is? It's red. Red is my favorite color. It's like apples and cherries, which are also my favorite fruit. Mm-hmm. And fruit kind of smells good like this when you put it to your nose, and you can smell it. And yeah, my sister wears a lot of bows for some reason, and it's like her style, but it's okay. It's very pretty that she wears it, but her favorite color is white, so just like this white bow on here. Do you have a favorite color as well?
Mm-hmm.
What's your favorite color?
I love pink.
You love pink?
Commands. You're asking.
Oh shoot.
Yeah.
You can't.
Alright.
So you can't ask like questions like that though.
You can. So for the purposes of this, I just want to be
my bad.
aware. You're good. You're good. So you just want to be aware about what zero demands actually means. So asking like, what's your favorite color? It's technically a demand.
Okay.
Right. So even though that might not be inappropriate for Brandon, just for the purposes of this activity.
Gotcha.
Just kind of be aware of that. All right. Nice job, John. Round of applause for John.
Yeah.
Excellent.
You know,
So-
plus, John, you did save that for last.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you had built up,
Yep.
you built up, and there will be a time as the relationship develops where it would be appropriate.
Yeah, it's so difficult not to ask
move
like
to
those
that.
kind of questions. 'Cause
Yeah.
they're like not bad like. So when I think of demand, I'm like, you have to do this. But I'm
Right.
like, oh, your favorite color. I'm just like.
He's got to come up with it, right? Yeah, he's got to
so
come up with an answer.
Exactly. There's an effortful response on his part that you're trying to get out of him, right? So you're asking that so that way he engages in some behavior, right? So it's different in some aspects, but it's pretty similar to saying, hey, Brandon, let's stand up and clean your room, because what you're saying is trying to get him to get up and do something. You asking him a question is trying to get him to do something, right? So again, not always bad to present those kind of like, what's your favorite color kind of things, but just be aware those are technically a demand. So when you're developing that rapport with him, asking those rapid fire questions might seem like, well, this is how you get to know somebody. But for Brandon, that might be something that is perceived as a demand.
It is a little counterintuitive because we think about relationship building, all of us, and we think about listening to the other, getting to know the other person. In this case, it's processed a bit differently, you know. And but if you do this for a period of time, you will certainly be able to engage him in that kind of communication, you know, just not so often, and certainly not in the beginning, right, Victor?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Right, so what part of that did John do really, really well with? So which one of our pride skills? Can you go back on this? If I swipe, does it go back?
Yeah.
Neat. All right, so which one of these did John do a really, really good job with?
Describe.
Yeah, he did a great job describing. Yeah, and enjoyment.
Yeah.
Absolutely. John was clearly he was using a very friendly tone, very engaged. He was describing the object really well. However, there were some parts that maybe were missed a tiny, tiny bit. All right, what do you think? Anybody want to?
Oh,
Praise.
Yeah, there was a couple opportunities to give a praise statement, and that's okay. So there was parts where she grabbed it and she was smelling it too. There was a good opportunity to give a praise statement. Hey, I love how nicely you're smelling that. Great job, right? So there's a bunch of different ways that we can kind of capture those opportunities to provide another rewarding experience, right? So like all of us, we like those praise statements. Brandon loves those praise statements. So describing what they're doing well is a really important part of that early rapport building. Yes.
I have a question. Okay, so it's not exactly with the zero demand, but I know like I learned a lot about like if you use a negative statement, like a certain amount of positive like praises and everything has to come after that. Is that like what? Do you know the numbers for that? I was just wondering. I was like, because it reminded me of praise, the enjoyment, all
Yeah.
of that. Like,
I think it's 5 to 1.
okay, I know it was
Yeah.
like.
So it's praise statements to feedback or redirection.
Okay.
So for every one instruction or every one corrective statement, you should be giving 5 praise
Okay,
statements.
because that reminded me
Yeah.
of the praise and
And,
enjoyment.
and I wouldn't get hung up on that
Yeah.
because it's you kind of you're in conversation with them,
Mm-hmm.
and you know it's a guideline. Would you say that, Victor? It's like
Yeah.
don't tally in your head,
Yeah.
but if you find yourself doing more of the other,
Yeah.
it's
Positive.
yeah.
I think for Brandon specifically, I think the 5 to 1 is good,
Mm-hmm.
but I am not a big fan of overall like sweeping statements.
Mm-hmm.
5 to 1 is best for everybody because people are individual, right? So we're all exposed to different stuff. We all like a different form of feedback, and some people don't like praise. As weird as that sounds.
But this guy does.
This guy does, absolutely. But be aware that the enthusiasm that we would give to Brandon is not necessarily something that we should give across the board to everybody. You know, I've worked with people that, they're on an outing, they're doing really well, and someone gives them a praise statement really enthusiastically in front of a bunch of different people, and they refuse to engage for the rest of the trip. So was that praise statement effective? No, not for that specific individual. For someone else, like Brandon, you give an enthusiastic praise statement when he's doing well, he's like, yeah, this is awesome, great. So individually, Brandon benefits from that 5-to-1 ratio, 5 praise statements per 1 instruction, and he benefits from that enthusiasm. How should praise, and we're talking about that a lot, so how should it be delivered? Like what qualities of praise are important? How about the tone of praise, right? So how many guys in here would think that it would be effective to just say, good job, Brandon.
Enthusiasm.
Nice. Yeah, enthusiasm. Perfect. That's the exact word I was thinking of. So the tone needs to be enthusiastic, right? Especially again for Brandon, not across the board, but talking specifically to Brandon, you gotta, like we were saying, you gotta mean it. It needs to be genuine. I always kind of consider it to be, if you bowl a strike in bowling and you turn around and your friend says, good job, because that's a little weird, right? So why, when Brandon does all of his goals really, really well throughout, all he's getting is, good job, pick up the paper. You picked up the paper, good job, right? Is that appropriate praise?
No.
Is that meaningful? Right? So what is praise supposed to do?
Make you feel happy.
Right, so it's supposed to be rewarding, right? So Brandon needs to follow your instruction because he's anticipating, once I do this, Victor's gonna break out, he's gonna be so happy. And I wanna see that, right? Do you think that he's going to have that type of anticipation for me saying good job in a monotone voice? No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. So just think about that when you're delivering praise. Right? So last thing on praise is, in addition to the enthusiasm, there's also a bunch of different ways to say it. So saying good job over and over again, even if you say it enthusiastically, it's good to kind of vary the tone a little bit, or vary the words that you're saying. So a lot of these on this list of the 99 ways to say good job are a little bit hokey. So some of them were like, that's the way you do it. Like, no one talks like that.
Sensational.
Sensational. That one actually might be. Yeah. So there's a lot in there that maybe a little bit hokey, maybe you wouldn't use, maybe sound really artificial, like you're in an after-school special kind of thing. But there's a couple of ones in there that are kind of cool variations. And really what this is supposed to do is make you guys critically evaluate, what exactly am I saying? Can I vary my good job enough? Can I add a couple different phrases to my repertoire so that way maybe the praise that's being delivered is a little bit unpredictable? So if you say good job enthusiastically, Brandon might just be like, yeah, there's another good job. Like, it's nice that it's enthusiastic, but it gives it the same words every time. If we mix it up and say, wonderful, perfect, yeah, that's the way to do it. That one sounded weird. But I picked like the one that I didn't want to say. Like, that's it. Awesome job. Perfect. I say awesome sauce a lot. It's just fun to me. So if you vary it up, it's kind of like a lottery, right? So Brandon's doing an appropriate activity, and he's like, which one am I going to get this time? Right? So there's that anticipation built even on top of that. So if you're varying your praise statement enough, he's gonna keep working because he's like, oh, which one is gonna be coming up next? All right, this is awesome.
What are your thoughts, Victor, on using specifics like, I like the way you mentioned earlier, or smelling that, or something?
Right.
That's obviously means that you're really in tune with what he's doing, and he knows what you like. You're giving him very specific information.
Absolutely. So does anyone know the phrase for that? Like that type of praise? There's a specific term for what Dr. Hayes is describing. So we call it behavior specific. So behavior specific praise. So awesome. So we want to vary the words that we're saying, make sure it's pretty enthusiastic, and when appropriate and when it makes sense, be really, really behavior specific about it. So I love the way you're making your bed right now. You're doing a fantastic job sweeping the floor. Awesome job cooking dinner. Right? So we can add that in there so that way he knows I'm receiving this enthusiastic, variable type of attention, or variable in the different phrases that you use for this specific behavior, right? So he's doing a lot of stuff when he's cleaning his room. He's standing, he's breathing, he's, again, not engaging in problem behavior at that exact moment, sweeping the floor. So if you just say good job, he's like, well, which one? Right? He doesn't know. So if we say specifically, great job sweeping the floor, then he's going to know, well, next time I want this enthusiastic type of praise, what do I need to do? Sweep the floor. Or, alternatively, next time you instruct me to do something, what's coming next? praise for that thing that you're instructing them to do. Right? So the more we can associate these kind of not so favorable or like non-preferred type of tasks with something awesome, the more we're going to see those unfavorable things that are necessary in order to build skills, in order to make sure that he's on that right track toward independence. Right? Guys have any questions about this first section about building rapport? Dr. Hayes, do you have anything to...
No. I think I would say, I say no and then of course.
Please.
That's so me.
We're sliding for another 10 minutes.
Okay. Things like we always say with individuals with autism, there's this whole eye contact thing.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I always believe is it's really the eye contact of the person working with him that is probably the most important. So, really connecting, with him, so he knows that you're talking to him and that you're looking at him and you're smiling at him. And, those kind of acts just while you're in his presence, I think really is part of it. Recognize him when he comes in the room. Hey, Brandon, it's good to see you. Those kinds of, kind of natural things you do become very, very powerful with Brandon and other guys like him.
Instruction, the instruction tone needs to be markedly different than the praise tone, right? For a couple of reasons. What are some things that you guys are thinking about?
I guess if like instruction tone and the praise tone are the same, he can't like differentiate the difference between
Perfect.
praise and
Perfect, spot on. So if they're exactly the same, he's gonna have absolutely no idea, what's instruction, what's praise, right? So a general rule of thumb that I like to follow, especially for guys that value that enthusiastic praise, someone that doesn't understand the language should know what's instruction and what's praise. So, or rather, if you're giving the exact same tone, but replacing all of your words with blah, it should still be obvious what's praise, right? So I go blah, 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 right? A little weird, but you know what was praise and what was instruction, right? So make sure you're aware of that. Yeah.
So as far as like directives, I just have a question. So I caught myself going like, oh, feel this. So what if I was like, oh, this is so smooth. If you want to feel it, it feels so soft. Like, is that because I'm saying like you can feel it, but I'm not telling you like
Yeah, that
feel
is-
it? Is that like a good?
That's
feeling?
perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great kind of alternative where this is available. If
Like,
you want to
if you
feel it,
really
it's
want
there.
to.
Exactly, exactly. So no part of that says you need to do this.
Whatever,
I'm
maybe
instructing
that would
you.
engage him to
Yeah.
want to feel it after you said that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Or even going to hand someone something could be good too. Or putting it kind of close in proximity to them. So if I was feeling my watch and I wanted to hold it, I could kind of feel it. So that way it's kind of giving like, hey, this is available if you're interested.
Okay.
Right? So that's also a good alternative. Perfect. All right. Does anybody have any questions, concerns?
I have an observation.
Please.
And the observation is the exercise was really powerful in terms of giving you the opportunity to try, to do this and recognize that it's difficult. And also to be, I think, really aware. I think it was really good when I heard you guys say, oh, darn, that was a demand. Oh, darn. That means you're beginning to get sensitized to when you're doing that. And that's the first step in being able to, do this well. Oh, I'm doing that. That's the reflection too around, wow, how am I doing here? And I heard that from all of you at one point or another.
Being
Some of the-
mindful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of the biggest issues, people don't realize that they're even issues at all.
Right.
So when you're interacting with them, how do you normally interact with a person? Well, you ask them questions. You want to know about them. But you don't think that's an issue, right? You wouldn't necessarily perceive that as instruction or a demand. But in this context, with this particular person, this particular population, it's important to be mindful of that. So the fact that you guys are even aware of that, or I heard you guys saying, giving each other feedback, saying, hey, that was actually a demand, and here's why. It's absolutely fantastic. And I heard that from each and every group. Really understanding what is not. Right? So we're going to be doing that throughout today. We're not just going to be talking about it. I'm not just going to be telling you this is what to do, this is how you do it, moving on. I actually want to see you guys demonstrate a mastery and competency of these particular skills. Okay, so we're going to be doing this throughout the day. All right. Does anybody have any questions before we move on to our next theme? All right. So next, we're going to talk about understanding and responding to problem behavior. So I'm going to try to narrow this down a little bit. there is a lot to cover within the kind of understanding of problem behavior, especially from the behavior analysis perspective or philosophy. So firstly, what is behavior analysis? So behavior analysis is a science that uses the principles of behavior to change socially significant behaviors in meaningful ways. So when we're thinking about science, we're talking about an approach that relies on objective information. Right? So will you guys be collecting data?
I'm looking at the Catalyst
Okay.
system, which
Oh, nice.
yeah,
Okay.
which is a phone or based program essentially
Okay.
of taking data. But my whole thing, Victor, and hopefully you have some recommendations, is I don't want this to be a laboratory.
Right.
I don't want the collection of data to be intrusive in any way.
Yep.
I want it to be as natural a process as possible. So, maybe an iPhone where you do a few things periodically to capture data, we'll do it that way. And absolutely, I don't want you to take any time away from Brandon
Absolutely.
to do this. So that's the plan.
If you're so busy taking data that you can't run the behavior plan or run goals because the data collection system is too demanding, then let someone know. Communication, that's a huge communication piece. So, but we do generally rely on objective information. We like to take data and make sure that we're being objective about our collection and understanding behavior. So we also use principles of behavior. So these are everything that's used based on procedures, based in basic research. And we want to make sure we're focused on things that are socially significant. So things that matter. We're not necessarily worried about Brandon learning how to shoot a three-pointer in basketball. If that's a leisure activity that we want to try to do, great. That's not going to be one of our goals because we have a lot of other more important things to worry about. We're not going to teach Brandon how to do a backflip or something like that because that's not going to improve his quality of life. So anytime we're thinking about goals, we want specifically to talk about things that will improve his quality of life, not just arbitrary things that we think, wouldn't it be neat if Brandon could do this, right? Sometimes they align, where the things that we want him to learn that'll be socially significant are really neat, but we're not doing things just for the sake of doing them. They need to improve his life in some meaningful way. All right, so there are some basic assumptions. These are a little bit heavy. I'm going to try to piece them apart a little bit. But really, the most important ones that we're going to talk about is the individual is always right. Behavior is not personal. Behavior has a function. And behavior changes gradually. Right? Which really you can think about all of those things combining to mean that behavior is the product of circumstance and learning history. Okay? So we'll take this kind of large statement and those kind of assumptions that we talked about before and kind of do a crash course in behavior analysis philosophy. All right, so firstly, the organism is always right. And I don't mean that Brandon gets to do whatever the heck he wants, but what I do mean is that if Brandon is behaving in a specific way, it's because that's what he's learned is effective. That's what he's been exposed to. So another way of saying that is that anybody exposed to the same circumstances would behave in an identical or similar way in a similar context. So if we were exposed to the same things as Brandon, we would engage in the same behaviors. Okay? So that doesn't mean that we throw up our hands and say, well, there's nothing we can do. That means that, well, we acknowledge this is why this behavior is happening. So what specific things can we do? What skills can we build in order to work on that particular behavior? What can we do in order to make sure that his quality of life is going to improve in the future? All right, next, behavior is not personal. I know sometimes it might seem like it is. I know that there have been times where I've worked with individuals where I've felt personally targeted, where I feel like this person doesn't like me. And that's simply not true. It's not personal. If you're having a rough day with Brandon, or any individual for that matter, it's not because they're trying to get on your nerves or anything like that. It's because that compared to someone else, he's learned that behavior with you is effective. Right? So I don't act the same way with my family, the same way I do with my coworkers, the same way I do with my friends, right? Because you have 3 different groups, and I've learned different social rules that's appropriate to act with these specific groups of people. So just in that same way, Brandon might learn that something's effective with one person that's differently effective with someone else, differently effective with someone else. So if you're finding out that maybe you're having a bit of a more rough time with Brandon, try not to take it personally. Just know that it's because that behavior has worked on you specifically, and try to be analytic about finding a solution to that. So if you're finding that something is that he's kind of a little bit off with you compared to other people, let's work on a solution. Let's communicate and figure out what we can do more in the future, or what we can do in the future to change that. Behavior as a function, this is one of the big ones. So all behavior has a purpose, and more often than not, problem behavior is communication. So Brandon is trying to communicate something to us. Maybe he's saying, I don't want to do that. Maybe he's saying, I want attention. Maybe he's saying, hey, give me that. Right? So those are some of the three big functions of problem behavior that we could possibly say. So we want to figure out what he needs. So what is he trying to communicate? And then teach alternative ways in order to get those needs met. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. All right. And lastly, behavior change happens gradually. Has anyone ever learned a skill overnight? Especially one that's pretty complicated, right? So you guys have experience. Did you guys become skilled in something you know? Like maybe you guys play guitar, maybe you're really good at a certain sport or video games or something like that, right? So does anybody have a skill that they learn like that? You're John Scoff. No? You didn't just wake up and all of a sudden, boom, expert at this particular thing? No, exactly. So when we're thinking about problem behavior, right, so that's often something that people engage in for kind of their entire lives, or something that's really, really effective at communicating something. So when we're thinking about changing that behavior, we need to think about the fact that we don't learn anything. We don't shape up any behavior like that. It happens over several days. Right? And that's why it's really important to be consistent and to communicate with each other. Right? So we need to make sure that we're being consistent, so that way behavior change can continue to happen gradually in the appropriate direction. Right? Does anybody have any questions, comments about what we went over? Those four kind of big things. Everybody get it? Everybody understand? Mm-hmm. There's whole courses dedicated to those 4 slides that I just went over. So if you have any questions at all moving forward, let me know. I just wanted to kind of lay the groundwork for what we're going to kind of talk about next.
The other thing I think I just to add quickly is in terms of determining what is the function of the behavior, it is often the case with Brandon and with other individuals that something could be hurting.
Yes.
He may not be feeling good. We just found out he has an impacted wisdom tooth that's causing, we didn't know anything about that. And so, don't rule that out. We always want to check to make sure the medical stuff is okay first.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
then we look beyond that. Right.
Does anybody know the number one reason that self-injurious behavior pops up, and especially like kids, like self-injurious behavior to their head? Ear infections.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So a lot of them have ear infections. They start engaging in self-injury, and everyone's like, all right, well, we need to put a behavioral treatment in for this particular behavior, when they didn't exhaust all medical options first. So absolutely, we need to consider medical options and rule them out prior to intervening behaviorally.
And make sure you communicate that too. So if you notice something, you tell somebody about it and tell the group about it.
Yes, absolutely.
Back to that communications, probably if there's one thing I can't say too much, is you can't over communicate here. I want you to talk to each other. I want you to talk to me, and really, sometimes if you're right in the middle of it, you can't see it all, and it's good to have another set of eyes look at something. So, please don't hold anything back. Everything could be improved. It's one of those things where the little nuances sometimes that mean a whole lot. So, good point. Good point.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Okay, so now we talked about some of those kind of basic philosophy kind of stuff, or the basic kind of like framework. So how does behavior develop specifically? So all those things considered about behavior itself. We want to think mainly about reinforcement. Everything comes down to really the history of reinforcement that certain behaviors are exposed to. So reinforcement is the process or procedure by which a behavior is strengthened or maintained because of an event that occurs after the behavior. And so there's a whole big giant mumbo jumbo. That means when something awesome happens after behavior, that behavior will happen again in that similar context, right? So let's say, for example, Brandon is thirsty. Brandon engages in self-injury. Then you give him a soda. What's he going to do next time he's thirsty?
Do self-injury.
Yeah, he's going to engage in self-injury. Why?
Because he thinks he's going to be reinforced with a soda.
Right, so because his learning history was such that self-injurious behavior produced a soda, right? So in the present, something awesome happened after this particular behavior under these circumstances, right? So in the future, when those circumstances come about again, if Brandon's thirsty and he's motivated to get a soda, is he going to use his words or is he going to engage in self-injury? Self-injury. Why? Because in other words, because it works.
It works, yeah.
Right? Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
And when you know someone like Brandon, where we've already said that attention is really important, that becomes, it doesn't even have to be followed by a soda.
Mm-hmm.
It's how you use your attention. You know, if you use your attention when there are behaviors that are ones that are desirable in our minds, okay? Things that we'd like to see increase, they will
That's a good word
increase.
for it, desirable.
Yeah,
That's
right.
desirable and desirable.
Mhm.
Those are, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or problem behavior. is
Right.
another one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alright, so this is really important. This is really what pretty much all behavior comes down to. What happens after behavior in certain contexts determines what we do under certain contexts in the future. Right? So something awesome may include presenting something preferred. Right? So that was the example where self-injurious behavior happens, something preferred happens afterward. Therefore, when I want a soda, well, I can engage in self-injury. Or we take away something annoying or aversive. Right? So we can terminate some sort of aversive event, whether it be work. So you're instructing him to go through his laundry goal, and he's engaging in self-injury, and then he tells you, no, Brandon, that's okay. You don't have to do this anymore. What's he going to do next time you're presenting the laundry goal? Self-injury, right? So the same thing's going to happen. That something awesome doesn't have to be introduction of something preferred. It could be removal of something bad. Right? And important thing to note is that behavior must increase in order to be reinforcement. So if we're thinking about appropriate behavior or desirable behavior, if it does not increase that behavior, then it's not reinforcement. So if you run your laundry goal and then you give him some awesome thing afterward, like maybe afterward he gets a cup of soda, right? Just edibles are super easy to conceptualize, like something's, you know. So laundry goal, soda, right? So the next time you ask him to do his laundry goal, he does not do it. He refuses.
Right.
Was that reinforcement? No, because it didn't increase the laundry behavior or the laundry doing behavior, right? So this is the important part about being data-based, about being evidence-based, about taking data on our goals, is that we need to know whether or not the procedures that we have in place of do your laundry, get a soda. Well, if he doesn't do his laundry again, we got to figure out what reinforcer we need to do next.
What's meaningful for him?
Right, exactly. So what's actually meaningful and specifically for that particular behavior,
Right.
right? So reinforcement doesn't happen in isolation. We don't have just like, oh, this is a reinforcer. Well, for what? Right? It always needs to be connected to something. Right?
The other thing you might want to mention too, Victor, is I know I've seen in situations, and I've probably been guilty of it myself, is being clear with Brandon and withholding. You know, you're not reinforcing something that is undesirable, let's say, like self-injury, and then after a certain point, after it escalates or a certain time passes, you give in.
Yep.
You're going to do that.
Yep.
That's the worst thing we can do. You
Yes,
know,
absolutely.
because then he thinks, well, it's not going to take just doing it one time. But I found that if I do it 7 times, she's gonna fold at
And
that point.
that's not 6 wins and a loss. That's a loss all around.
Loss all over.
Yep.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
Sorry. Yeah,
No,
I
it's okay.
figured you had that in there somewhere.
All right. So let's go over a couple examples and talk about whether they are or are not reinforcement. All right. So what does reinforcement have to do again?
I think increase that behavior.
Right. It needs to increase the behavior that directly precedes the reinforcer or the supposed reinforcer. All right. So a child screams in the supermarket when his mom tells him he can't buy a piece of candy. After several minutes of screaming, she buys a candy for him. Is that reinforcement?
No.
Well, why not? What's he gonna do next time?
It
They're
is
crying for the
Well,
candy when
so-
he wants the
So,
candy.
so for what
it is a
behavior?
reinforcement.
For what behavior?
Undesirable.
Not
behavior.
undesirable.
Right. So for crying, right? So the principles of reinforcement or something awesome that happens after some behavior that makes it increase in the future, it applies to desirable behavior and undesirable behavior all the same. Right? The principles of behavior do not care whether or not it's something we like or we don't like.
Right.
It's going to increase it all the same. Right? What about the next one? It's a little better. So a teacher wants her classroom to spell more words correctly on tests. She announces that students that score 100% on spelling tests will be able to pull a toy from the prize box. Right? So let's say every student values what's in the prize box.
They're
Is
gonna
this
study more and do good.
Right, yeah. So is this going to be a reinforcer for studying behavior?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely, right? Yeah. Especially if more students then get hundreds on the test.
Right.
All right, what about this last
It's
one?
motivation.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're motivated to get access to that prize box, right? So then when they make this kind of contract, this behavior is super valuable. So if you think about it from, like, I'm motivated to get the toy or get something from the prize box. I have to engage in this behavior to get it, so now I'm going to engage in this behavior so that way I can get access to the prize box, right? And it's not a problem that Brandon needs something. It's not a problem that Brandon really, really wants soda or wants your attention. Is that bad?
No.
No, but what the problem is the means by which he tries to accomplish that, or the means by which he tries to access that. Right? So this is why the alternative is so important, and this is why it's so important not just to reduce problem behavior, because if we reduce problem behavior but don't teach anything else, we have what we call a behavioral void, where there's a need or a want or motivation to get something, but now we don't have any way to get it. So if we only say, no, you can't engage in self-injury, we're going to block that, but the self-injury is to get attention, well, how's it going to get attention now? It's kind of a shrug, right? No idea. Like going to the gym, I did this for myself actually. So you can only watch something like Netflix is locked down unless I go to the gym first, right? So is that a natural consequence of going to the gym, getting access to Netflix? No, you should just be able to go because you want to be in good shape, right? So this is something that's pretty contrived, right? So I need a little bit help with this particular skill or this particular behavior. So Brandon, like me with the gym, he does not necessarily value the natural outcome of doing his own laundry, of cleaning up after himself, of cleaning the kitchen or being organized. So just like me with the gym needs that extra little motivation in order to perform this skill, Brandon sometimes needs that too. Right? Alright, so when it's raining outside, you close your umbrella so you don't get wet. There's another one, right? That was actually today. I wrote this like a couple days ago. That's crazy. I didn't even know it was going to be raining.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah, right? Alright. So when you were thinking about reinforcement, you know, how I said earlier, reinforcement needs to be paired to some behavior, right? So reinforcement's not in isolation. A reinforcer for one behavior, not necessarily one for another. So when you're selecting a behavior to reinforce, consider the effort involved in the target behavior, the size of the reinforcer, and whether or not there's equivalence between the two, or whether or not they match, right? So if I ask one of you guys, like, hey, if you skip around this house 50 times singing Yankee Doodle Dandy for 25 cents, will you do it?
No.
No.
No. What if I said I'll give you $1 million if you do it?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So the size of the reinforcer is really important. It's not just I'll do this for money. I'll do this for a specific amount of money. So if we're offering Brandon like 2 drops of soda for finishing cleaning his room, so he cleans his room, he gets 2 drops of soda. Guess who's not cleaning his room next time you ask him to?
Yeah.
Brandon. Right? So we gotta make sure that they match. So if you're asking him to do something particularly effortful, maybe increase the size of that reinforcer. Right? So maybe a little extra time relaxing, chilling, watching a movie. Maybe a little bit more edibles compared to a small task. Right? So when we're delivering reinforcers, we want to consider the quality of the reinforcer. Right? So what type is it? Not every soda will do. Right? I don't personally like Coca-Cola, but I might work for soda for some things, but I need a specific quality of soda in order for that to be valuable. The quantity, I was saying 2 drops, not going to be good enough. I need a little bit more than that. And the immediacy. So as soon as some task is completed, you're right there with the reinforcer, right? So firstly, because he's going to be like, all right, cool, once I finish this, I get it right away, right? So that's super valuable because it's immediate. If I said to you guys, you know, today, if if you guys do something, you'll get $50 in 20 years compared to tomorrow. That matters, right? It matters a lot. You also want to consider that problem behavior might happen in the middle of that. So if Brandon does something really, really great, and then you're delaying giving that reinforcement, and all of a sudden he engages in self-injury, and then you deliver it, what did you reinforce? Problem behavior, right? So the quicker you make that, the less opportunity there is to engage in problem behavior, which means that you're going to more effectively reinforce the behavior that you're trying to reinforce. All right. And lastly, I think this is what you're getting at, be aware of factors influencing value. Do you think that we're going to work for food right after lunch? No, it's probably not going to be too effective. So if you're working on like a laundry goal and then he gets a snack afterward for doing it appropriately, and he just had lunch, it's probably not too motivating, right? So consider all of those things, and also consider what's freely available. If he has free access to water, he's not going to work for water. Why would he? If he has free access to watching movies, if he's able to watch them at any time that he wants, or if he spent the entire morning watching movies, and now you're going to go to work on a goal, and the outcome is watching a movie, it's not really too valuable, right? So we call that satiation, where certain factors or certain different qualities of that reinforcer, availability of it, has a really profound impact on whether or not that person's going to be willing to work for it.
And the outcome also could be that you lose a very valuable reinforcer because it has, it's no longer reinforcing. And so that's one less thing you have to use as a reinforcer. So use that very specifically, and for very, good reasons, and he knows the connection. Otherwise...
And sometimes this might involve artificially restricting access to some stuff. So if, for example, we do find this really awesome new candy, again, more than edibles are going to be used. It's just super easy to talk about it in the context of using edibles as a reinforcer. But we might figure out turns out he loves M&Ms. Not really sure if that's true, but turns out he loves that. But if he's asking for them, we might have to artificially restrict access, because later on, when we need him to perform a goal, if he can ask them anytime he wants, he's not going to do work for them. Why would he? Right?
Could be a first then kind of opportunity.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's kind of what we found is pretty effective.
I just to put a comment in here, I think that where he is right now, where we should be is reinforcing smaller goals. Smaller, we'll work our way up so that we can do something more broadly. But right now, that reinforcement, immediate reinforcement, and so he's clear what's being reinforced right now, is going to build up to a point where he can then not require a reinforcement. Because that's the other thing. I don't know if you talk about that either, but we want him to do certain things without a reinforcement all the time, and so
reinforcement's meant to be faded.
Yeah,
like the contrived reinforcement.
Yes.
I was gonna say prevention. Now, if you notice certain mannerisms he may do before an outburst or before an undesirable behavior, if you see that precursor, you can just intervene then.
That's perfect.
That's
perfect. Yeah, absolutely. Redirect him, or some of the ways Victor's
proactive strategy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that all comes in with having a relationship with him, because you would have to know certain things that he does, and have that connection, that rapport.
And constant engagement.
Right.
Too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's also an excellent point that anytime, especially with edibles, which I caution the use of them, don't just kind of we'll just give an edible when things go well. If it's not necessary, you shouldn't do it. Again, I just use it for the sake of an example. Super easy to think about. Something good happens, boom, discrete thing delivered. Often people become dependent on them.
Yeah.
Especially if they're used for way too long of a time. They're not a go-to. They're used when necessary and fade out as soon as possible.
Well, I think the other thing that we want to do is have Brandon be able to go out into the community and pretty much fit in, pretty much do his thing, and with your support and things that he's learned. And that's why I think as often as we're talking a lot, and I think early on we will depend on edibles more, but ultimately social reinforcements are appropriate for all of us, and think about it's free. And if he will, if we could transfer the power of an edible to a social, it's going to create less stigma for him and all kinds of things that will get him to the independence that we're looking for. So
yeah, so only when necessary and faded really quickly.
yeah.
And often when you're giving an edible, if you guys are planning on using them, if they are necessary, pairing it with the verbal, with that praise, with that enthusiastic praise, so that way when you fade the edible, there's still some sort of signal what you did was appropriate, right? Because of its association with the food, that primary reinforcer.
And then you can fade it more easily too, right?
Yes.
For Brandon specifically, because I know like some kids like to have I worked with some kids and you give them choices. So like if you complete this, you can have this or this. Does he get overwhelmed with choices, or does he like to have
I would like for him to have as many choices as reasonable.
Yeah, because some people just automatically have a reinforcement already set up, and other times I've been which do you want to work for?
I think want us always to look, no matter what he's doing, is to give him choice. If it's about what program to watch or anything, we want to give him choice.
Yeah, some people have them set up and some others.
Yeah.
The natural world is full of choices as soon as we can get in there and give them maybe 2 options, then 3 options, because the world's full of so many different options.
Yeah.
And then you're on your way to independence at that point.
That's right.
Yep. All right. So now we talked about how behavior can be strengthened. Right? So now we're going to talk about something called extinction. Right? Does anybody know what extinction is? But extinction is the process or procedure by which the behavior is reduced because of discontinuation of reinforcement. Right? So how is that different than the cat with the spray bottle? What's the difference there? Because both behaviors are being reduced, right? So what's the big difference?
The cat is punishment.
Right. So the cat, we're actively doing something. So punishment is an active process that we want to avoid at all costs, right? So extinction is just discontinuing reinforcement, right? So if we wanted to discontinue something like aggression, right? So a student engages in low intensity aggression to get his teacher's attention, what would we do? So he's engaging in some behavior, the reinforcer is teacher attention. So what would we do?
Technically you want to ignore this anger, but you don't want to ignore him, but you don't want to give him the attention for the anger.
I think you hit on a really important piece.
Yeah.
In that we're ignoring the behavior, not the person. Right?
A really good example of this being used in a way that doesn't get you the outcome you're looking for is often in a lot of facilities there's a lot of things going on, and maybe not the staffing is not what you'd like, and the training is not there, so they haven't gone through these discussions. And so somebody, let's say Brandon, is being really, really good, and he's getting no attention, and we know attention is really important to him. And if we're ignoring him, because I've heard people say, oh, he's being really good right now. And so what they're doing is not giving him anything for that. They are putting good behavior on extinction.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And so what does he do?
He's gonna act out.
He's going to act out, and we are going to go to him. So what we've taught him, we haven't given him anything that will reinforce what we want, but we've given him every reason.
So catch him being good.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is often where we see people say, what happened right before the problem behavior? Well, nothing. I was like, well, when was the last time you engaged with them? 20 minutes ago. I was like, well, there it is. Time is a really important factor, especially for attention-maintained behavior. So saying nothing happened at all, we left him alone for 20 minutes, like, well, there you go. Right? I'd be motivated to engage in whatever behavior I could to get attention.
I love it.
It's okay, you're good.
So if you're sitting watching a movie with him and a couple 10 or so minutes goes by, but he's being really great, you just want to be like, hey, I really appreciate how calm you're being right now, or something like that, even throughout.
Or a pat on the back.
High
I love how nice you're sitting. Do you want a snack to watch the movie? All right, so a child engages in vocal outbursts when instructed to do work. How can we put this on extinction? So instructed to do work, problem behavior happens. What do you want to, does anyone want to take a guess at what's happened in the past?
It's worked.
It's worked, right? It's worked at removing that instruction. So what can we do to withhold that reinforcer? So he's doing that saying, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. So we have to do this work, right? It's really important that we do it. All right.
And once you make, there's something he needs to do, you don't negotiate out of it either. This is what you're going to do. And
The
it's
lowered
not-
expectations piece.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So he'll kind of play like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And he'll be like, oh, it's okay, I'll do it for you,
Yeah.
right? Which is a
He
problem.
does that.
Yep.
That's terrible.
Yeah. So
Like he'll try to act like, oh, I don't know how to make my bed, but he knows how to do
Yeah.
like, yeah, right. He knows how to do everything, like everything.
Well, and Chanel was always really good at knowing that and getting him to do a lot of things. One of the things that's happened to him in the last couple of years is that he always set the table. He always put fill the dishwasher. He always did those things. And when he got with working with some of the individuals, they would say, no, Brandon, let me do that. No, Brandon, let me do that. No, Brandon, I can do that. Because it is easier to do something yourself sometimes, right? But it's certainly not beneficial or teaching him anything. So those skills are still there, but he's now going to have to, like a muscle, begin to build them up again.
Mhm.
So,
yeah, the most ethical way we can help people is to give them tools to do it independently, not
Yeah.
to do it for them.
right. And with Brandon, what he will often do in a situation like that is, or what you need to do in a situation like that is, because he'll be often trying to communicate something and maybe his communication is not clear, is to say to Brandon, I didn't understand that, Brandon. Can you say it again? Or can you say it more slowly? And then, to do that, take the time to do that. Oh, you want cake? Yeah, good. No problem. After dinner, we're going to have cake tonight, But you got to ask him to do it again. And when he starts to get his language back, which he will, when he does that, you don't accept anything less than what we know he can do. So you can say that better, Brandon. Say it again, and then we'll get back to where we were. Okay.
All right, so teacher procedures often produce bursts of behavior, and this is what you were talking about earlier. So we will often see a variability or a varying rate, variability of the behavior itself, and intensity of the behavior. So increase in other problem behaviors may be a good sign because it means that we're effectively withholding reinforcement. So if he's having a particularly bad day, when you implement some difference in his behavior plan or increase some sort of effort required to get reinforcement, right? We might see an increase in problem behavior if we change up our interaction techniques for undesirable behavior because we've withheld the reinforcer effectively, right? So it's important not to give in to problem behavior variability because we could shape up more intense behavior. Right? That's what I think you were talking about earlier. But before we get into an example, I want you guys to think about your own behavior, right? So if you guys ever go to a vending machine, put the appropriate amount of money in, press the button for the soda, and no soda comes out. What do? Good, you bang on the machine, what else? What was that?
Get frustrated.
I start pushing a lot of
Okay, push the machine, kick the machine, right? So in other words, you do a bunch of stuff you wouldn't otherwise do, right? So that is the extinction burst. You engage in some behavior, putting in money, pressing a button, and there's supposed to be a reinforcer of the soda. When that is withheld from us, we get frustrated. We do a bunch of stuff we wouldn't otherwise do. We get a little bit aggressive with the machine, right? So when we're thinking about when we expose something to extinction, that variability very well could happen. It's not a bad sign, and that's kind of just how behavior works sometimes. So just to drive from the point of communication is problem behavior, or problem behavior is communication, right? And function is really important. So let's consider this following. Right, so every time Brandon is thirsty, he engages in self-injurious behavior to his head. When he does this, people hold his hands, talk to him, sometimes bring him the water or soda that he desperately needs, right? Because he's thirsty. Since the behavior sometimes works, it continues at a really high rate. And you started blocking it and giving attention and candy when he's not engaging in self-injury. The behavior decreases a little bit, but never really goes away. Why not?
Because you're still giving him what he wants.
Right. But did we get to the function of the behavior?
And no, absolutely not.
What was the function of it?
It's because he was thirsty.
Right.
He has to communicate that need.
Right, so he's asking for something really specific, right? So if I ask, like, hey, John, can you hand me the remote? right? I'm going to keep asking until he actually gives me the specific thing I'm asking for, right? Language is made up. So to Brandon, this self-injury is him communicating, I'm thirsty. And we're giving him attention and and candy when he's not engaging in self-injury, right? But is that the reason he's doing it? No, and that's the importance of function, right? So by taking function into account, and by troubleshooting and trying to figure out what is the purpose of this behavior under this context, we can provide a much more humanistic treatment, right? So what can we do instead? Give him some alternative way to get his needs met. So anytime we're working with him, think if Brandon could calmly communicate what he needs, what would he be saying? What would he be saying here?
I'm thirsty.
I'm thirsty. Can I have some water, please? Right? So that's really what we can think about function as. If this person had the ability or was taught appropriately to calmly express their needs or calmly ask for something, what would they say? Right? So that's what we can think of function as well.
And that gets back to one of your comments earlier, I think, about choice.
Yes.
That's where you can also use choice. Oh, you're thirsty. What would you like? You know.
And then that makes communication really valuable too.
Right.
So if you say, do you want A or B? And he says B, and you give it to him, he's like, cool, words get me things I need. I'm going to do this
it's
more
valuable.
often.
Yeah, it works.
So then it gives you an opportunity to reinforce appropriate communication throughout the day if you're giving him choice from things that you could go one way or another. Do you want to clean your room, or do you want to do laundry first? Right? Okay, you picked one or the other. Communication is now more valuable.
And choices do definitely increase independence because then they have a say. So they get exactly what they want. If you say you give like 3 or 4 choices and they pick what they want, if you just handed them like a drink, it wouldn't have the same meaning.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, so we've talked about building rapport, talked about how problem behavior develops, how we're kind of working with problem behavior. All right, so now we're going to talk about more toward the building compliance and working on skills. So that's really this whole afternoon is going to be dedicated to. How are we actually getting him to, clean the bathroom, do his laundry, clean up after himself, all that good stuff. So part of that is gaining compliance. So presenting something awesome after desirable behavior can be effective, but a lot of techniques that are used are just minor adjustments for how we present instruction. So it doesn't always have to be this contrived, you do this thing, you perform this skill, you do this task, you earn a can of soda or something like that. Sometimes a lot of things that we do in order to get people to comply, in order to get them to follow instruction, in order to initiate instruction, really super minor adjustments. So these may not always be necessary, but if you're unable to gain compliance, these are just another kind of tools within your tool belt in order to possibly get compliance later on. All right. So firstly, behavioral momentum. Has anyone heard of that before? Okay. So behavioral momentum, it's kind of something like the small talk, really, of behavior. Right? So when you're asking a favor of somebody, what do you usually do first? You just lead right in and say, hey, I need something from you. Now, what do you do?
Small talk before?
Yeah, you make a little small talk before. Maybe you give them a compliment, right? You don't just start off an interaction by saying, hey, I need something. They say, hey, how was your weekend? Hey, you look really nice today. That sure looks really nice on you. By the way, can I also have this thing, right? So before you ask a favor, you might butter them up a little bit, ask how their day is going, give them a compliment, before then asking for the favor. Right? So why do we do that?
So it's more likely for them to say yes.
Good, yeah. So they're more likely to say yes, or they're more likely to engage in some behavior that we're requesting of them, right? So before presenting some sort of instruction, it might be worthwhile to kind of get the ball rolling on some easy tasks, right? So we could get some easy ones done before presenting that large effortful one. So what would be the first task for maybe standing up and initiating shower routine? What can we do first? Kind of get that ball rolling. Some easy tasks to reinforce. Maybe just standing up, sitting up, something like that. What else?
Maybe like finding his towel.
Nice. So you can go around the room, find your towel, do those easy ones, get the ball rolling.
Find your change of clothes.
Right. So instead of, let's go take a shower, which is long, it's effortful, that reinforcer is so far away, we can give smaller tasks that are in the beginning first. So then when we say, let's go to the bathroom and shower, like, you know what? I've already been listening to you for a couple of these different pieces of instruction. If I keep following your instruction, or if you present this larger task to me, I'm probably going to keep it going because we already got the ball rolling. I'm already initiated in that, right? So if you're finding that this behavioral momentum of maybe breaking up this task into smaller components in the beginning is effective, do that, right? So do what's effective, do what's working for you. Present instruction in a way that when you give it in that specific way, something awesome happens. Brandon complies, Brandon initiates that task. When you're presenting instruction, if he's not following through, change up your technique, right? And part of that could be using behavioral momentum to, instead of saying, let's go to the bathroom, to, hey, sit up. Why don't we take the blankets off, right? A lot of smaller tasks can be done first prior to this larger effortful task. All right. So next, we can think about how we're transitioning from one thing to another. So how many of you guys go from your favorite thing in the entire world directly to work or something pretty non-preferred?
No.
Right? If you can, you probably take a break, right? So when we're thinking about transitioning between earn time, right? So maybe hanging out, chilling, watching a movie, maybe we want to think about throwing a buffer activity between that awesome thing and work, right? So Brandon has a history of engaging in problem behavior to avoid going to work, right? So to avoid some sort of task that you're presenting. If you're presenting a task at the exact same time that you're taking away his favorite thing, do you think that's kind of setting the occasion for problem behavior to happen? Absolutely, right? So especially when you think about the contrast between the two. Favorite thing in the entire world. So favorite thing in the entire world, directly to work. Probably going to occasion some of that problem behavior, right? All right. Next, just in the same way that we took used behavioral momentum, such a tongue twister, in order to break up this large task, maybe give the first couple steps in isolation first, then when you give the more effortful piece, he's more likely to comply with that, right? We can also break up large tasks into smaller activities. Do you do large tasks all at once? No. So if you have to clean your house, you have to vacuum, you have to clean your bathroom, you have to make your bed, maybe do some laundry. Do you do them one after another, after another, after another? For guys like Brandon that maybe don't have the patience to wait for that, it might be worthwhile to break up large tasks into smaller pieces. So making or cleaning your room can be broken up into, first sweep your floor, great. Now let's take a break, earn a reinforcement. You know, take a little bit of a break. Here's a couple minutes on your iPad. All right, now iPad time is up. Let's go make your bed. That's all done? Good, 3 more minutes on the iPad. We don't need to have these large tasks or these effortful, long goals done all at once, one after another, after another, after another, right? So we want to set the occasion for as much success, as much reinforcement as possible. So even though we could say, you can watch a movie after you clean your room, you might not be able to wait that long. So if you're presenting sustained instruction, and you're finding out that he is consistently engaging in problem behavior, and you're not successfully running this goal, what do you want to do next time? Possibly break it up, right? You want to communicate, say, hey, I'm seeing that this task might be too long. Maybe we should break it up so that way you can have some earn time throughout this large routine, right? So think about this, but definitely communicate with the group. So there might be someone else that says, hey, I'm able to get it done, and I'm using this technique instead, right? And then we end up at the end of it with the best possible thing that we can do for him, right? So in addition to really critically evaluating which one of these interaction techniques might work best, also communicate and figure out what other people are doing, right? So, because it's important that we're consistent. Right? So if you find out something's working really well, share it with everybody, right? Or share it with everybody and say, I think this would be a good idea to pursue. All right, so an overview. We want to present a few easy tasks before presenting large, effortful ones. When a person is transitioning off of highly preferred activities, buffer activities would be good, and reinforcers can be delivered while completing large routines. Doesn't necessarily have to be related, so a lot of times behavioral momentum is just doing something super easy, like a one-step task, like clap your hands, touch your head, sort the bears, right? So we want to try to keep it as relevant as possible to the task, but if he is able to do those one-step instructions, that's also something that we can use in order to get the ball rolling, right? So I've never done this with Brandon personally, but he does one-step instructions well. So he can do touch your hands, touch your head.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, touch your nose. Yep. Say your name. What's your name? So, considering that, that's often what we're thinking about when we're thinking about behavioral momentum of getting the ball rolling. I use this a lot trying to get guys to stand up. So instead of saying stand up first, I say touch your nose, what's your name, touch your head, stand up, right? And then they stand up. Whereas when I started off, the instructions just saying stand up, they just kind of sat there and looked at me. But when they're already getting that ball rolling and following instruction, then I was able to do that. Right? And then you can reinforce those smaller, less effortful behaviors as well. So you can say like, good job, great job doing that, right? But you want to keep it as rapid as possible too. So try to like deliver 1, 1, 1, big, right? Now we're in our final section, communication and skill building. Okay, so this is really probably the most important piece, because remember we were talking about extinction earlier, right? Can you do extinction by itself? Not really, because then there's no, you don't really know what to do instead of problem behavior, right? Problem behavior happens for a reason. They're trying to get something. Right, so it's a result of an individual's learning history. They're learning what's effective. Right, so simply putting problem behavior on extinction, withholding reinforcement for it, isn't going to work because my brain is not going to know, how am I going to get out of doing this task? How am I going to communicate, hey, this is too much work for me to do. You're going to need to reduce this by a little bit. Right? Because if he only has problem behavior to do that, and we're not teaching him some other thing to do, we're not teaching him how to communicate effectively, then he's going to keep engaging in problem behavior. He has no other way of getting his needs met. Rates of both desirable and undesirable behavior influenced by what happens afterward, right? Equally sensitive to the environment, whether it's desirable, whether it's not desirable. We can reinforce problem behavior, we can reinforce appropriate behavior, we can put appropriate behavior on extinction, we can put problem behavior on extinction. Right? All works the exact same way. And lastly, discontinuing reinforcement can result in unsafe variations of problem behavior. Right, so what are we going to do? Well, we need to teach communication. So in order to avoid dangerous variations in problem behavior, extinction must always be accompanied by a procedure that teaches an alternative replacement behavior. Right? We call this functionally equivalent. So what is the appropriate communication or the functional equivalent to escape maintain behavior? What's the appropriate equivalent to that? Escape. So you present some sort of instruction, Brandon engages in problem.
I don't want to do this.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that, right? So we couldn't consider that an alternative replacement behavior. Like, I need a break. I don't want to do that. Right? You guys ever said, I need a break?
Yeah.
Right? We were encouraging you to do that earlier. If you guys need a break, you can communicate that. Right? So we consider that an alternative replacement behavior, functionally equivalent. What about absence of attention for an hour, then vocal outbursts happen? Right? What's the appropriate alternative replacement behavior to the vocal outbursts? Communication, right? Well, what specifically? So no one's talked to him for about an hour.
His need is to be spoken to.
Right.
It's interaction.
Right, yeah, so what replacement behavior could we teach?
For him to talk to you, like bring up conversation.
Yeah, so he could go up and initiate conversation with you. He could say, come talk to me. Right? Hold my hands. Something like that. Right? What about he wants his tablet, right? So trying to get access to his tablet, and then he's engaging in a little bit of aggression, just trying to scratch him a little bit. What would be the alternative replacement behavior? What would be the replacement behavior to the scratching in that instance?
Asking for the tablet.
Right. What could he say specifically?
I want my tablet.
Right, I want my tablet, please. So communication is super important. But identifying that replacement behavior requires that we're considering the function of it. Or why is this behavior happening? Right, so we brought up a couple examples. These are the different contexts that problem behavior might happen in. And this is what he's probably trying to communicate with us. So we could, a few large categories that can be broken down to. Right, so we talked about access to attention, escape from instruction, or escape from some sort of aversive condition, or access to tangibles. Right, so food, iPod, or it wasn't an iPod anymore, food, like a tablet, something like that, an iPad. Alright, so consider that you're hanging out with Brandon watching a movie, and without any noticeable reason, he begins engaging in vocal outbursts and aggression. You offer him a snack and a drink, but he keeps engaging in problem behavior until you get close to him, and you hold his hands. So what do you think the function is there?
He wants attention.
Right, he wants some attention, right? Cool. So when you're seeing situations like this come about, remember that like what is reinforcing that problem behavior turns that behavior off. So what does he eventually get as a result of problem behavior? And that's probably what he's trying to communicate to you, right? So remember I was asking John to hand me the remote earlier. I'm gonna keep asking him until I get that specific thing that I'm asking for. So just in the same way, since Brandon's trying to communicate with us, he's gonna keep persisting with that until he gets specifically what he wants. Right, so that's the importance of function. So even though we care a lot about what the behavior looks like, right? So what is the exact form of the self-injury? What does it look like? Really what we're more interested in is why it's happening. Under what contexts is it occurring? Right? All right, so the communication, the form of it exactly, whether it's vocal, whether it's problem behavior, whether it's sign language, gestures, the form that they choose has been reinforced in the past. Right? So if I'm signing for something like bathroom or something like that, how come? Because what happened after I did this?
You signed for bathroom.
Yeah, I signed for bathroom, and then what does someone else do?
Someone takes you to the bathroom.
Right, they point me in the direction of the restroom, right? So this has been reinforced. I'm asking for something specific, and then someone was like, "Oh, you're asking for it's right over there, right?" What about this? Eat, right? So why am I doing this?
Because you're hungry.
Right. And because it is a history of contacting what?
Communication. That's your way of getting what you
Right. So this has been reinforced by food.
Right.
I do this. Someone gives me food. That's the awesome thing that I'm looking for. That's the purpose of that behavior. So it's more likely to happen again in the future. So for a lot of guys that engage in problem behavior, it's because that form of communication has been reinforced in the past.
And it worked for them.
Exactly. So it works. It's effective. It's effective and it's efficient. So what is the fundamental difference between this and this?
This gets you something.
Well, they both do, right? So the point, right? So the point is that either of these, the only reason that this means something to everybody and this doesn't, is because we made it up.
Right.
This could be sign language for eat. We don't actually, we make up language.
Right.
So to Brandon or to other persons served to engage in self-injury, this is their sign language for give me food, give me attention. I don't want to do that, right? So just important to remember that sign language is just it's pretty much equivalent to speaking, right? Speaking is behavior. This is behavior. If this is followed by something awesome, I'm going to do this. If speaking is followed by something awesome, I'm going to speak, right? So either one are just as likely to try to be some sort of communication. Right. Everybody get that? Cool. All right, so, and he's going to, he and anybody else, we're going to pick the form of communication that has been the most efficient and the most effective. All right. So Brandon asks for you to hold his hands, but you're busy selecting a movie for the two of you to watch after completing several goals successfully. While waiting, he engaged in self-injury. So you put down the remote and you immediately go to him and hold his hands. All right, so what's the problem here?
He wants you to hold his hands, but you're distracted.
Right.
And then he does the self-injury because he's trying to communicate further.
Mm-hmm. So the self-injury, we can kind of think of it as like an extinction burst, right? So I tried communicating vocally, but it's not working.
So I gotta try a different way.
Right, yeah. So when self-injury is happening, can you guys drop what you're doing and go attend to it?
Well, if they're gonna hurt themselves, then yeah.
Right, absolutely. So that behavior is super efficient, super effective at getting your attention because you drop everything and go over when self-injury happens. So we should be willing to do the exact same thing when appropriate communication happens. In fact, it's necessary. So if I have the choice of doing this or saying, hey, come talk to me, and saying, hey, come talk to me, doesn't really work that well. Which one am I going to do? I'm probably going to keep hitting myself because it's working more effectively, more efficiently, right? So since we can drop everything in order to attend to problem behavior, we also need to be able to drop everything to attend to appropriate behavior in order to make it more efficient. Right? If we're running over as problem behavior is happening like that, they're not going to do something that doesn't work like that, even if it's an appropriate alternative. Even if it means that they're putting themselves in an unsafe or dangerous situation. Right? If they're motivated enough to get your attention, they'll do whatever is going to get it the quickest. Right? So we do a thing called functional communication training, and it's a variety of techniques for occasioning communication, responding to appropriate communication, and redirecting inappropriate requests. Okay? Right. So functional communication training is really kind of an umbrella term for really the things that we were talking about earlier, right? So offering choice and having him vocally communicate which one that he wants, that's functional communication training. By giving him the option to earn chips or a soda, and then he communicates, I want chips please. Right? That is functional communication training. When you have something of his that he really wants and you're holding it in front of him, like if he really wants water and I'm holding this in front of him, and he says, I want water please, say, great job using words, here, have some water. That's functional communication training. So really what functional communication training is establishing a history of reinforcement with vocal appropriate communication, so that way that's going to be his go-to later on. Right? So we want him vocally communicating, and we want it to be valuable, which means that we want to be able to have multiple opportunities throughout the day to have him communicate with us in an appropriate manner. So this is what you were talking about earlier with I kind of call it drift. So when you get to know Brandon, you will get to understand his approximations. Right? So he has things like a Jubilee means soda, right? Obvious, right? Jubilee, right?
He's actually saying soda please.
Saying, oh yeah,
He's saying soda please, and it's coming out fast. If you say that slowly, Brandon, he will say, I want soda please.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
So often his vocalizations are approximations of words, and sometimes difficult to understand him, right? But eventually you'll know that Jubilee means soda please. Means I want soda please. However, the goal is not for him to be able to communicate with this group right here. What's the goal for him to be able to communicate with? Everybody, people out there, exactly. So we need to make sure that Brandon is able to communicate with everybody. So that means that when he says Jubilee in the community, it's going to be able to be reinforced. But unfortunately, we're not able to do that. We're not going to be able to teach a new language to people that he's going to be interacting with. So we need to teach him English. So when he's saying Jubilee, we want him to slow down. And just as Dr. Hayes was saying, we'll say, Brandon, slow down. I don't understand you. And he'll slow down and say, I want soda, please. Can everyone understand that? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Right? So then, in the future, what's he going to jump right to? Saying it slowly, right? Because that's what works. Right. That's what contacts reinforcement, not the fast, quick version of that.
The issue is people have been accepting that,
Exactly.
and so now we've got to break that.
Mm-hmm.
You know. Mm-hmm.
Yep. When working with other populations like young children, those approximations are reinforced. However, with Brandon, we got to get him back to saying full words, speaking more slowly, being able to communicate with a broader audience. Right? So we're not working on his, we're working on his speech in the sense that we're trying to get him from that approximation up to really more appropriate, more sophisticated communication. It's really the goal. Right? Yeah, so before honoring appropriate communication, consider whether someone new to Brandon would understand him. Right? I want to hear, it's close enough. Right? I'm sure they would. Right? If you're not sure, just have them repeat it. That's okay. All right, so now we're going to go into the different types of requests that Brandon could have. Right? So this is broken down into what I call kind of 3 categories. Either always available, temporarily unavailable, or always unavailable. Right? So I could ask for, I don't know, I could ask for a little bit of water. That's always available right now, right? It's currently available. I can use my words and get access to this. Right now is an appropriate time for me to drink water. Right? There's nothing wrong with that. However, so there's something that isn't available right now. Like if I ask to go home, well, I have to finish up hanging out with you guys. Right? That's not available right now. But it will be available in the future at some point, right? Hopefully. But then there's stuff that's always unavailable, right? So I can't go into a Ferrari dealership and ask for one of their cars, right? So that behavior of asking for a Ferrari will always be unavailable, right? Especially now. So can afford that. All right. So first, regardless of whether or not what he's asking for is available or unavailable, always needs to be behavior-specific praise. Because even if it's something that is not available, he still needs to contact some reinforcement for engaging in that appropriate communication, right? So if you just say, no, you can have that right now, right? Well, you're like, well, I'm going to engage in problem behavior now, right, in order to get my needs met. But if we say, like, Brandon, great job using your words. You're like, oh, I still got some encouragement for that. I still contacted some reinforcement. I'm still getting attention for that. So regardless of whether or not he's asking for something appropriate or inappropriate, always give praise. Right? So firstly, requests for available items. Of course, we're going to immediately grant it. Right? So it's available right now. It's an appropriate time to be asking for that. So yeah, absolutely. He asks for water. He asks to go to the bathroom. He asks for attention. Right? All of those things are always available. So we should be delivering them on a continuous basis when he's requesting them. So he asks for attention. Talk to me, please. Right? Yeah, absolutely. I can talk to you right now. Right? Again, dropping everything in order to go attend to him whenever possible. All right, next we have items that are temporarily unavailable. So we want to inform him when they're going to be available. So if he's asking maybe to go to his bedroom and you're working on goals and you need to work on them for, I don't know if the schedule says we're working on goals from this time to this time, and he's asking to go to his bedroom, right? We can say, hey, Brandon, we can go to our bedroom in 30 minutes, right? And then we can offer a similar alternative activity. So, hey, we can't go to the bedroom. We can go there at 3 o'clock to lay down for a little bit. Why don't we go have a seat on the sofa and take a break instead, right? So we offer a reasonable alternative that is available right now. Or, if he's asking for a soda, great job using your words. We can have soda with dinner at 5. Why don't we have water instead, right? Because to him, asking for a soda might just be, I'm thirsty. And that's what he's learned has produced something to drink, right? All right, and lastly, we have items that are always unavailable. Now, there aren't too many of these. One of the ones that has come up is asking for a sock while he's already wearing socks, because he has put them in his mouth. There seems to be some sort of like self-soothing kind of thing, some kind of like what would be a way?
Well, Brandon engages in self-restraint. It's the only way it's his only strategy right now. We're trying to teach him others to self-regulate. So when he gets very, very tense or really anxious and he's afraid he's going to hit his head or bite himself, he would want his helmet on so he doesn't hit his head. He would have something in his mouth so he doesn't bite himself. So it's a way for him to keep himself safe, or to restrain himself, as Chanel says, with something so he doesn't hit himself. So these are not what we would call healthy strategies. These are the only ones he's got. So we've tried to do some things to give him that without the risk of him gagging or whatever. And so there are a couple items that we're currently using now when he feels like I need to bite down on something. He doesn't bite himself, but it's actually a chewable jewelry that is used.
I think bite band.
Bite band.
It's
bite
a little
band.
easier to say than jewelry.
Exactly, bite band.
Yeah, although jewelry is a pun.
But he's very, very, in a way that's really resourceful. but it can be dangerous, and it's not obviously going to help him become independent and out there and not carry that stigma with him. So there's a lot of reasons we want to not do that.
So think of it like fidgeting a little bit, or like scratching an itch. So we were talking about when something awesome happens after a behavior, right? And then that behavior is more likely happening in the future, right? Talk about reinforcement a little bit. There's sometimes where it is kind of that self-soothing piece where I don't fidget because I want you guys to be like, hey, Victor, you're fidgeting really well right now. Great job, right? I don't need something awesome to happen on the outside in order for this behavior to be reinforced, right? So in that same way, we're thinking about the self-soothing of having something in his mouth to kind of prevent the self-injury, the helmet, something like that. So when he's asking for something like a sock, which he had put in his mouth, which was a safety concern, of course, so we had to get an appropriate, reasonable alternative to that. So we got bite bands, which are designed to be put in the mouth, and it's not going to have like pieces of cloth break off or anything like that. It's safe. It's, like I said, a reasonable alternative. So socks, when he's wearing shoes, or wearing socks rather, is always unavailable because he has a history of putting them in his mouth. So we say, great job using your words, right? Still, because he's asking instead of engaging in problem behavior to get it, right? It's still better. And then we tell him what is available. So, awesome job using your words. It looks like you're already wearing socks, but we can have a bite band instead.
And, back to this area, I mean, a lot of what we need to work on with Brandon is this idea of finding ways to self-regulate, to center, to calm himself that are healthy ways, and appropriate ways. And he does respond well to, all right, breathe, Brandon, and breathe along with him. Count to 10, Brandon. Kind of some of those things that Victor was talking about that he does easily and well. It kind of distracts him. It breaks that compulsion almost that he has.
Lots of energy. You want to do something with it. So I think the exercise is awesome. I think the kind of mindful breathing to kind of get back to normal is good. And lastly, he does have an iPad that's for communication. Now we kind of figured out that whether or not we wanted to have that as primary means, we decided he has a good enough oral motor skills in order to pursue vocal communication. However, there are still some times where I'm not really sure what he's saying. Right? I'm sure there's some times that you're not quite sure what he's trying to communicate to us. But we don't want to put that behavior on extinction. Right? So he's using his words. We can't give the reinforcer that he's asking for. So what are we going to do? Well, we use the iPad. So if you ask him to repeat himself a couple times, so I think we said 2 times, and you still can't understand him, give him his iPad and say, tell me what you need. Because we still don't want him to say, you know what, talking's not working, so guess what's coming next? Problem behavior. Right? So I'm going to do something else that has been effective in getting me what I need. And we're probably not going to like what that looks like. Right? All right, so throughout the day, there are countless opportunities to make communication valuable. We were talking about a couple of them earlier. You can kind of do this kind of forced choice situation where you have to get 2 tasks done. And instead of just saying, we're going to do this task first, this task second, you think, which one do you want to do first? And then he has the opportunity to communicate, right? So we make that communication more valuable, the more opportunities that we provide Brandon to communicate with us. So he knows I communicate. That communication is now influencing what my environment looks like, right? So I can use my words and things happen around me that changes what's going on, right? So it's super, super valuable. Because as of right now, his main way of doing that is problem behavior. So if we can change that and teach him, instead of problem behavior, you use your words in this way instead, and it's gonna work. He's gonna go with that instead. So not only is it gonna work, it's gonna work even better. It's going to be less effort for you. It's going to be more efficient. So it's going to be your go-to pretty much, as long as we're consistent with that. Okay. So ask Brandon to complete a task without giving all the needed materials. That's another way, right? So we can ask him to wipe down the counter, give him a paper towel, but don't give him any of the spray. So then he'll say, "Spray, please." Right? So there's another opportunity. You can give him his meal without a fork, and he has to ask for the fork, right? Those specifically need to make sure that you. Those are included in the teaching plan. Okay, so if you think that there is an opportunity So like, hey, you know, when we're performing this task, I wonder if it would be worthwhile to contrive a communication opportunity by giving him this piece, but not this piece, right? So, you know, definitely encourage you guys to be thoughtful about that, or to kind of like think about ways that we can get some more communication, but definitely make sure that you're communicating before just kind of trying stuff out like that. Make sure everybody's on the same page. All right, so throughout this, you know, we brought up reinforcement a bunch, right? So reinforcement for communication would involve what? So how do we appropriately reinforce communication from Brandon?
Give him praise when he talks.
Right, that and in addition to what?
You mean in addition to the praise?
Meeting his needs.
Right, so what he's asking for.
Okay.
Yeah, so how do you appropriately honor a request? Well, you listen to what the request is for, and you get access to it. Right? So the reinforcement for communication is really, really important, right? Because behavior, something awesome, that behavior happens again. So if we think of that in communication, communicating something specific, that awesome thing that I'm trying to communicate, well, I'm going to communicate more often now in the future, right? And reinforcement in communication is also really important because communication is a really generalizable skill, meaning that communication can go into areas that we didn't train. So if he's learning communication is really, really valuable, and you've taught me that it's valuable under these circumstances, when a new circumstance comes around, he's going to communicate there as well. So communication is one of those big pieces that has had the most widespread effectiveness, really because it's teaching a skill that's able to apply to so many different situations, if not every situation. Right? All right, so it's our goal for Brandon to be as independent as possible. So part of that is building his skills. All right, so that's something that we haven't talked about quite yet. So we talked about how to build rapport, right? What problem behavior is, what it means, where it comes from, how it develops, how it can make it worse, or how it can make it better. And then we also talked about communication, right? But we didn't actually talk about how do we take these tasks, right, and actually teach them, right? So we talked about how to initiate them, how to break them up into smaller components, but there's actually a lot of really interesting teaching techniques that we can use in order to take this kind of large task and then break it down into smaller components, okay? So that's what we're going to talk about now, is really focusing on skill building. All right, so first, who knows what a prompt is without looking at the slide? All right, cool. So yeah, so it's a little bit of extra help that we need, that we provide to Brandon or any other person, or any other individual. Sorry, gotta get the Bancroft lingo out. So it's extra help that we give so he can complete the goal or complete a task, right? So spot on with that. One of the biggest part about prompts is that they need to be faded. So the whole point of a prompt is so that way it's not going to be necessary anymore, right? So this helps teach efficiency at a task, or increases teaching efficiency. So rather than just trying to give instruction and then just kind of wait for Brandon to figure out how to put all the bears in the dish by himself, we can give some extra help in the beginning and then slowly fade that help away, right? And that's the important part with prompts, is that they're faded. They need to be faded quickly, they need to be faded systematically. So if you're noticing that you're running a goal with Brandon, and you're on the same prompt over and over and over again, it might be time to reevaluate the teaching plan. So this is another part where communication is really important. If you have reservations about how quickly he's learning this goal, then you need to communicate with someone so that way we can reevaluate it. That way they can reevaluate it.
Do you talk at all about the issue of prompt dependency?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think I talked about it.
Okay.
Okay. I do not. So prompt dependency is, alright, so I try to gather more of this. So the difference between prompts and a cue. Alright, so prompt is a little bit of extra help. Cue is what's already going to be in the environment. Our goal is for Brandon to engage in some behavior in response to the cue, not our prompt. Okay? So to illustrate that, what is a prompt, or what is a cue, like a natural cue to wash your hands? Okay, well, okay, so you guys are mentioning components of it, but how do you know? Like, what's the cue to wash your hands? How do you know you're supposed to? Your hands are dirty. right? Maybe they're sticky. What else?
You just like did some type of activity that just requires you to wash your
Right.
hands after.
Right. So maybe you're playing with like Play-Doh and
Or use the bathroom.
right. Use the bathroom. You're about to
Or
eat.
you're about to cook, right?
Right. You're about to. Yeah. Awesome. So a bunch of situations that is a natural cue to wash your hands. Problem with a lot of prompting is that if you're prompting too much, that ends up being part of the cue, where the person can't engage in this behavior or
They
do
don't
perform
recognize
this
the
skill.
cue, 'cause they're
Exactly.
dependent on the prompts.
Precisely, exactly. So that's what happens a lot. Where if it's right before dinner, I just go over to the dinner table, and then I need someone to come physically guide me to the sink, and then I'm here and then I'm waiting because I think that I wash my hands by someone grabbing my hand, turning the water on, lathering my hands, right? So I stop at each step because I'm waiting for something to prompt me to do it. So really, it's not even a prompt anymore. If I'm expecting it to come, if I'm waiting for someone to come prompt me, it's a cue. Right? So that's what happens if prompting is done incorrectly. So we're going to talk about a couple different techniques for how to avoid prompt dependency. Right? So this is going to be different techniques where we systematically fade prompts. So that way Brandon's able to be more independent. Right? Thank you for bringing that up. That's really important thing. All right. So prompts can be delivered in a variety of sequences, and it's important to follow the sequence as they're written so the amount of help is consistent across several different people. Okay. So, for example, if I'm giving a certain sequence of prompts, I need everybody else to be giving it in the exact same way. So that way, we're all working in the exact same way. So that way, when we're taking data on it, we know that these particular prompts were used, it's consistent across the board, so we can more adequately monitor Brandon's progress. All right, so for example, I will, can I use you? So, I am going to have you just put this orange bear into the bucket. All right, so first we're going to do a gestural, physical prompting sequence with a 5-second delay. All right, so don't respond until the physical. All right, so first I'm going to give the instruction, put the bear in the dish. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Put the bear in the dish. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Put the bear in the dish. Right, so I give him the opportunity to do it independently. Then I give him a pretty non-intrusive prompt of the gesture. Then I give the prompt that I know he's going to be successful with. Right? So that way, and then he can get
So
the
repeat it
reinforcement.
again, so then you can do it.
Yep, exactly. So we want to end on a successful trial. So if that happens, I would reset and I say, put the bear in the bin. Alright, so, alright, that was perfect. Yeah, that was awesome. So please stay here for just 1 second. Now, if I said, put the bear in the bin, put the bear in the bin, put the bear in the bin, did I give him an opportunity to be independent? No, why not?
Because you just did it for him.
And well,
No, you didn't wait enough.
Yeah,
Right.
you didn't wait enough time for him
Too
to
fast.
I didn't
respond.
even process what you were saying.
Yeah, exactly, right? So, and you kind of see that a lot, where this kind of like rapid prompting over and over again, right? So sometimes it's 5 seconds, sometimes it's 10 seconds, sometimes it's 30 seconds.
It like depends on like the person, or is this like
And
Mhm.
the task too, because it could
Exactly.
be more complex, not just
Just
doing
have
that.
patience.
More steps.
Yep, thank you very much. All right. So then we could also do the most intrusive in the beginning, and then fade away toward the end. Actually, I need you again. I'm sorry. Okay. So this is I'm not a big fan of the least to most or most to least, but we go with the prompt that we know is going to be effective right away, right? So is there any circumstance where a physical prompt wouldn't be effective?
I'd say a lot, actually.
Well, for this particular task, if I'm taking
oh,
his
no,
hand,
actually, no.
bringing it to the
Right.
bear,
That's
bringing it to the
exactly-
dish, what's the
It's gonna
probability of
always
him?
be effective.
Right, so we start with the thing that we know is going to be effective every single time. And then after several trials of that, or several days of that even, then we go to something that's less intrusive. But at the same time, giving him the instruction or the cue. So like, what is the natural cue for this task? What's the natural cue?
The directions you give?
Right, good, the direction that I give. So I want him to respond to put the bear in the bucket, right? So while I'm giving him that vocal thing, so I don't give him the opportunity to be independent with it, I say, put the bear in the bucket. Good, excellent. And then, I think I have my reinforcer in here.
That was easy.
All right. So there's his reinforcer, right? So he did that he did that with the physical prompt. So then maybe the next day, say, put the bear in the bucket. Excellent job.
That was easy.
Right? So he's constantly getting reinforcement because that's the goal, is to respond to the more intrusive one. Then after he shows, yeah, I got that, no problem, I can be led to the bear and put it into the dish. When you hover my hand over it, what's the big deal? Then I can switch to gestural prompts. So I can say, put the bear in the bucket. All right.
I thought you were gonna do it like the second
No,
time.
he's good. So because we know that he's good with the physical, then I can fade away a little bit by just pointing, right? So then I'm decreasing the help that I'm giving, thus increasing his independence. Then, because the cue has been constantly delivered, it's been associated with reinforcement, right? So let's say that instead of that was easy, it's an edible, right? So he's really motivated to get access to that edible. So then later on, maybe several days down the road where we systematically fade that prompt, I just say, put the bear in the bucket. Yeah, he's doing it independently.
And I think that sometimes you can actually even break it up further, right, Victor? Like, for instance, let's say you did the total, prompt the first time, and maybe after one or two times you just touched him on the elbow.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit, it's less than this, but a little bit more than just so it's like taking these increments. Mm-hmm. Is that correct? Or
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's generally what I prefer.
Yeah.
But saying that I didn't want to get too jargony with the full physical, physical up
right.
there. But usually you would try to fade along one dimension of a prompt.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're doing the full physical and he's doing it all well and we're ready to move on to the next step, I would say, put the bear. So I'm just giving him a light physical guidance on the back of his arm, right? Because in what way is this more intrusive than this?
Right.
There's not really any dimension that they're similar with. So I think that's an excellent point, and that's something that I think more programs should be moving toward, is that fading along one singular prompt. And I know for Brandon, he works really well with physical prompts. So what are some tasks that we can use use prompting with? Either the right away physical to backing away, or the letting him try to be independent and then jumping in when you need to. What are some tasks we could use this with?
Like actual tasks?
Yeah.
Like sorting silverware, like you were saying earlier.
Yeah, cool. So we can use this for sorting silverware, right? So the initial instruction of sort the silverware, and then we can provide cues or provide prompts as we need to, right? So if we were doing the first method, what would we do? Can someone talk me through what sorting silverware with a gestural, physical, with a 5-second delay would be?
It would be like, can you put the fork in the drawer? Like, just say it,
Right.
and then wait 5 seconds. If they don't do anything, then you point to it. Like, put the fork, and then you point to the drawer.
Right.
And then if no response after that, you can actually kind of guide them, grab their hand, or move their arms and stuff, and take the fork and then put it in the drawer.
Right, perfect. So we go from giving them a little more opportunity to be independent. So just giving them the prompt. Then we do some pointing. Then we do what we know is going to work. What about the other way around? What about starting with physical and then slowly backing away? Someone talk me through that a little bit.
Take their hand and put it on a fork and then move from wherever you had it to the drawer.
Nice. So, and how many times do you think you do that?
As many times as it takes when they can start.
Right. So it's kind of flexible, right? So whether we move to the next step, it's kind of going to be a judgment call. If you're finding that you're still guiding them significantly, like they're not helping you out at all, maybe it'd be worthwhile to practice a little bit more. But if that person is kind of going off on their own, you're barely touching them, then you can move to the next step, right? So then what would you do?
Point at the fork and then point to the drawer.
Nice, good. So that was the physical. Now we're doing gestural. Right, cool. Then what?
And then you would just verbally tell them,
Right.
put the fork into the drawer.
Cool. Awesome. Making sense to everyone? Alright, cool. Alright, so we should avoid unplanned, rapid, or repetitive prompting. So how effective do you guys think it would be if we said, put the bear in the dish, put the bear in the dish, put the bear in the dish, put the bear in the dish. Right? Why not?
Kind of aggressive.
It is, right? So it's kind of aggressive prompting. So it's repetitive. What did we say about insanity earlier? Right? Right? So if you repeat the same thing over and over again, expecting him to respond differently. Right? So if he's not responding to that instruction now, what makes you think he's going to respond to it after you repeat it like 3 seconds? Right? It's basically the same circumstance. So why would this same instruction be useful now compared to like 3 seconds ago when conditions were basically the same? Right? It's probably not going to be. In addition, prompting should be, or rather, we want to avoid unplanned prompts. Because remember what we were saying about the cue, right? So what's the cue supposed to do? The natural cue. So we were saying to wash your hands, the natural cue is you're about to eat. You just maybe handled something that was a little bit dirty or something like that. You know, you just used the bathroom. So what's the natural cue to most things? It's what's supposed to naturally bring the behavior about, right? It's supposed to naturally signal this is the behavior you're supposed to engage in. So we were talking about, what if we're working on Brandon tucking in his chair after he stands up, right? So let's say we're going with a prompting sequence. Let's just go, we're going for physical prompting, okay? So he stands up, and then you physically bring him to the back of the chair and help him tuck in. Are you saying anything? Are you giving the verbal prompt there? Are you saying tuck in your chair? Oh, why not?
Because you're doing like, that's the cue.
So what is the cue?
Standing up is
Right.
the cue.
Right. So standing up at the table is supposed to automatically bring about the I'm going to tuck in my chair, right?
That would bring about the motion of doing that.
Right. Exactly. So if I'm adding if I'm saying during that, hey, Brandon, let's tuck in your chair, and I'm bringing you to the round of physically prompting him in. What did I do? Well,
you're reinforcing that with language.
Right. Well, I'm adding something extra to that cue. Right. So I'm just adding something extra that doesn't need to be there that we're going to have to fade away later on. Because me saying let's tuck in your chair is not supposed to signal it's time to tuck your chair in.
Right.
Him standing up is supposed to. Right? So the only reason I'm saying this is to be careful about when we're providing verbal instruction. Okay? So only do it if that's what the cue is supposed to be. If not, try to avoid that verbal instruction. Because that's just something that Brandon's going to have to cut through. He's going to have to cut through that noise in order to figure out what part of this am I supposed to be responding to when the prompts are going. Right?
One of the things that was helpful for me in this is thinking about, you know, the least that you can embed yourself into the process. And by talking him through it, you're now then part of that process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It sounded like McDuff was saying that.
Yeah.
Also, just something a little extra, like what is the best way we can physically prompt as to not be as part of that person's natural cue, right? So should I be right here, or should I maybe be a little bit more behind? Where can I be positioned?
So like out of view, right? So
yeah, out of view, right? So if I'm right here, me being here is part of that natural cue to engage in this particular behavior or perform this skill. If I'm behind him though, what he's seeing, I'm not part of it at all. So that way when I fade away, it's going to be less detectable. I don't have to fade the visual either. It's just the physical. And so any chance you get, just kind of be thinking about what is supposed to be signaling that this behavior is supposed to happen.
Because if you want to get to independence, you need to be the least intrusive that you can be, right? So that
Exactly.
then you're totally fading out, and he's totally doing everything by himself. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, please. That's
Yeah.
valuable insight. And the prompting should be individualized to the task and to Brandon. Right? So we were mentioning physical prompts were really effective. If you're working with an individual that doesn't like being touched, you're not going to physically prompt them, clearly. Right? If you're working on something like identifying colors, can you physically prompt him to identify what's blue, what's green? No, you can't, right? So it needs to be individualized to the task as well. Sometimes because it's not feasible, sometimes because it's a more effective prompt. Okay? right, so now we're going to talk about chaining. So chaining is really important for tasks that are really, really long. So we did something that was pretty simple, right? Take one bear, put it in one dish. Right? It's kind of a one-step instruction, right? So for things that are a little bit longer, we want to make sure that we're being deliberate and we're being careful with how we're teaching, right? So something like toothbrushing is actually pretty complicated. I think sometimes we maybe don't think about how complicated of a skill that is or how many steps are involved. So of the people here, how many people wipe your toothbrush before you put the toothpaste on? Right. How many do it afterward? How many do it both? Okay. All right. So we have some pre-wetters, some post-wetters, and some double wetters. Right. So if we're all teaching Brandon how to brush his teeth, how are we teaching him? Well, probably in the way that we've learned is correct. Right. And that's a problem, especially when we're thinking about what level of prompting we're providing. So if I'm teaching Brandon how to brush his teeth, I'm going to teach him to take his toothbrush, wet it, put the toothpaste on, brush his teeth. But then if someone who's a post-wetter is teaching him, he's going to grab the toothbrush, start to put it under the faucet, and then someone's going to stop him and prompt him to put the toothpaste on, then wet it. Exactly. He's going to have no idea, how the heck do I brush my teeth? Because I'm trying to do it the way that Victor taught me, but now I'm with this new person and they're telling me what they were doing is wrong, and now they don't think I know how to do this skill. So the way that we go about kind of fixing that, and we're going to use the bears again, is we have something called a task analysis. So a task analysis is a large, complex task broken up into small parts. So if you guys were to sort your bears and you had to do it by colors, so you had to do certain colors first, which would you pick? Everyone just shout out a color.
Red.
Purple.
Which one would you do first? Right, okay. So I'm trying to learn how to do this skill, and I'm reaching for a color that you wouldn't select. You see here how many different colors popped up? I'm gonna get corrected. So when I go to do this task next, well, I'm probably gonna do, well, all right, I was supposed to do blue first, so I'm gonna reach for blue. Now I'm with someone that does red first. Now they're prompting me to go to the red one. I'm like, all right, well, I guess I gotta do red first. Next person wants me to do purple. I'm reaching for the red, they're bringing me over to the purple. Right? So it's really important that when we're doing these long, complex tasks, everybody's teaching them the same way.
Yeah.
Each instance of toothbrushing needs to be working toward more independence.
Right.
Yep.
If the routine is the same every single time, then he's going to be more comfortable to do it himself without any
That's
help.
the point.
Exactly.
And then and get to a point where he doesn't even need the visuals,
Right,
and he
right.
just knows how to do it. I mean, that's the point. That's what we want to get to. Yeah.
Right, yeah, and there are a bunch of different prompts, not just the ones that I mentioned. So there are physical prompts, there are gestural prompts, there are verbal, there's model. So some of them more applicable than others, right? So I could give a model prompt for, Brandon, wipe the counter like this, you try, right? Clearly that makes sense. But I can say, here, Brandon, get in the shower like this. There's some things that don't necessarily work.
Right.
Right? So that's also what I meant in this previous slide of should be individualized to the task. Because there's some things where it's not appropriate, like toileting, clearly. Brushing teeth, you can't really model toothbrushing. However, there are some things like picture prompts, where there's actual like pictures of these particular steps being performed that will cue him, this is what I do next. So take a toothbrush, it could be a picture of a toothbrush in a toothbrush caddy. Putting it under the water, you can have a picture of that. Putting toothpaste, right? So then he can follow these things in a certain sequence.
I think his had 32 steps for his, which is, a lot of steps, including rinsing his mouth.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole step of putting things away, all of those things. So the entire process.
Yeah. Or something like washing your hands. Again, you can't really model that. Sometimes the more appropriate one would be something like, physically prompting, something like that. Yeah. So there's a lot of really long tasks. Like, I was talking about toothbrushing, but what are some other tasks that we could use this? So, good, tying your shoes, perfect. What else? What else can we use? Chaining. Or what?
Cooking.
Cooking, cool, completing the meal. Right, yeah. And these are things that are interdependent, meaning they all need to happen in a specific sequence. So does it matter the sequence of things when you're cooking? Absolutely it does, right? You gotta add getting dressed, good, perfect. Cleaning a dish. Right, yeah. So
Your bed.
yeah, awesome, fantastic examples. Now getting dressed, that's another one that People might do it in a different order.
Yeah.
Showering is something. Some people go top to bottom, some people go bottom to top. So when it matters what order we're teaching it, right? So when that kind of stuff matters, it needs to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So if he's getting dressed and we're helping him do that, we need to know what steps we're currently working on. So is he putting his shirt on first or his pants on first? It matters. It might not seem like it does, but it absolutely does. Especially when we want him to be initiating that next step all by himself. All right, so we were talking about cues last time. So when we're thinking about a chain, what is the cue for the step in the chain? Okay, so think about something like toothbrushing. What is the cue to, I'm gonna start something like this, but wet your toothbrush. What is the cue for it?
Turn it on.
Right, so you put the water on, and that's the natural cue for the next step of putting your toothbrush under it. Right? So when we're going through these task analysis, it's important, again, not to put in unplanned prompts. Not to add anything extra to that cue that's unnecessary. Because the previous step should cue the next step. Right? Alright. So complex tasks are broken down into smaller units and then taught in sequence. And of course the sequence of them are really, really, really important. In addition to maybe it's inappropriate for something to happen before, like putting your pants on before you put your underwear on, right? That's meaningful, but sometimes it's something that's kind of arbitrary that we select just so that way we're teaching things in the same order across the board. So that way he knows, all right, this step, this step, this step, this step. Right? So for these long tasks, significant help is needed to learn and performing tasks, each task, and the order of the steps. Okay? So we're going to try doing backward chaining and forward chaining. All right, so in forward chaining, we select the target step, and then we allow independence up to that step, and then we prompt the rest of the task analysis, okay? Okay, why don't we do 6? All right, so 6 we're doing forward chaining, right? So can someone walk me through what steps are independent and what steps I'm prompting?
Steps 1 to 5 independent, and then the 6 more prompting.
Perfect, nice. So we're starting at the front and we're teaching all the way back. Right? So let's do that one. So step 6 is my target step. Right, so sort the bears.
He's so happy doing it.
All right, nice.
That was easy.
So sometimes you'll get the target step is where to start prompting, or is the last step that you're letting independence. Okay? So we did step 5, steps 1 through 5 independent, step 6 prompt. Okay? So the way this would normally work is I would prompt the whole thing and during the very first session. Okay? Then I would keep prompting the entire thing for a few sessions. Then I would let him do the first step independently, then jump it. And then we slowly introduce the next step until all of a sudden he's doing the whole thing by himself. So now, we are going to go in the opposite direction. So we're going to do backward chaining. And the reason I swapped them is because usually we do backward chaining. That's usually kind of the order we go. So while forward chaining was we prompt the entire task and then fade away prompt from the start to the bottom, right? So we would prompt the entire thing, and then step 1 independently, rest prompted, step 1 and 2 independently, rest prompted, 1, 2, 3, etc. Right? Now, we are going to prompt the whole thing in the beginning to teach the order of this task, and then we're going to start at the bottom and then work our way up. Right? So this is actually better, usually, in most instances, mainly because that person contacts reinforcement after independent responses rather than prompted ones. So there's that association between something awesome and independence rather than forward chaining where there's the association between prompted responses and reinforcement, right? So what would be the first step after all of these were prompted? This person probably understands the order in which these barriers are supposed to be sorted or knows the order that we're supposed to brush our teeth. So if we get all of these steps down and we're pretty sure that Brandon is ready to progress to the next step, what do we do? Number 6, right? So we prompt in the beginning all the way until step number 6, right? So this is going to be a little bit more obvious when you start allowing independence. right? So I think a couple people were getting confused when to start after I gave the target one, right? It's a little weird. So this one's a little more obvious. So if I say the target step is 6, what do you guys do? Prompt.
We prompt
1 through 5.
Yeah. Good. You prompt 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and allow independence on the target step.
Yes.
Yep. What about step 4?
1, 2, and 3, you would prompt and allow them to do 4 by themselves.
Right. Perfect.
Then learn to do 5 and 6, right?
It's 4,
Yep.
5, 6 bonus. Okay.
Yep. So you do all of the steps until that. So if I'm talking about step 4 is our target response, prompt 1, 2, 3, and allow independence on 4, 5, 6. Okay. And again, these are introduced one at a time, slowly over probably what's considered a long period of time. Right. So for something like brushing teeth, we might be on that last step at independence for 3 consecutive days, or maybe a week, or maybe a couple weeks, depending on how long it takes them to complete this. Right. So. All right. So we're going to start off doing the entire thing. Sorry, there's a lot of noises coming. So we're going to do the entire thing.
Right.
Okay? So blue. And don't say the color like I just did, because that's an extraneous prompt. Awesome. So that is how we would teach, right? So he's learning the order of the bears because I'm guiding his arm to these specific locations. Then, I'm going to separate these a little bit so it's easier for us. Then, after he's demonstrated that he's able to perform this task really, really effectively while I'm helping him out, now I'm just going to let him do only that last step. Oh, I forgot.
That was easy.
So what was the problem with that reinforcement?
A little bit delayed.
Good, too delayed, right? Yeah, not immediate. So the immediacy of reinforcement is problem. All right, so now I'm just working on the last step. All right, so my target step is step 6. So what am I doing?
Prompting me 1 through 5.
Good, it's prompting 1 through 5, and then what am I doing in step 6?
Having me independent.
Right, so I just back away. Right? All right, cool. So let's sort the bears.
That was easy.
All right, cool. Does that a couple times in a row, then what?
Then you go down.
Good. Keep working your way up. Okay? So now, prompting steps 1 through 4, then let him do 5 and 6 all by himself. Okay. So a couple things to remember about this: try not to give prompts during the chain, unless absolutely necessary. So if we're doing something like hand washing, we want to avoid giving those vocal prompts while you're moving to the next step. So if you're physically prompting, just physically prompt and give praise as needed, right? Even that's something that maybe not totally necessary and might be a little bit distracting. Not bad though, right? Compared to, all right, now we're getting the soap. Now we're rubbing our hands together, right? So why not? Why is that bad?
Because that turns into a part of their cue, right?
Right, exactly. So that becomes part of that kind of natural step, right? It becomes part of the routine. So then when you fade away the physical prompt, and that person is just standing there, why isn't he going on to the next step?
They're looking for the vocal prompt.
He's looking for the vocal prompt, exactly. So we've inserted a prompt that's unnecessary, that we needed to fade away, but that person's waiting for that vocal cue that you provided, or that vocal prompt, in order to move to that next step, right? So we want to avoid those unnecessary prompts because we don't want them to be hung up on a step, because we removed really 2 prompts at once if you think about it.
Right.
So if we fade away and we don't vocally prompt them, then that's 2 things that they need to adjust to.
Right.
Rather than if we only physically prompt them and back away, that's only one thing they need to adjust to. And they're more likely to move on to that next step. Okay. And for whatever reason, verbal prompting is more likely to lead to prompt dependency. So any chance you get to avoid those vocal prompts, especially those unnecessary ones, please do not give those vocal prompts. All right, so the last thing we're going to talk about today is error correction. Right? So what happens if they make a mistake? Right? It's going to happen. It'd be nice if every single trial, every single task we presented, boom, did it completely correctly. We did a backward chain, And we went from step 6 to 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1 in a matter of a couple of days. It'd be great, right? No errors whatsoever. Unfortunately, that's not always feasible, and unless we have an error correction plan, unless we determine something like that, everybody's gonna do something differently, and what's gonna happen? It's gonna get confused, right? So if there is an error, we need to make sure that we are responding to it correctly, because if we do it improperly, it can result in faulty or incorrect behavior chains. And these may be additional steps, shortcuts, behaviors that accompany the target response. Okay? So if we're thinking about something like sorting, and I am on my way to doing this independently, if I am supposed to do the blue one, and throughout this routine, I have learned that I pick it up, put it down, and do like that, because that's the way the error correction works. What am I going to keep doing? Well, I'm going to keep doing that every single time. If we keep reinforcing that behavior chain. Okay? So, if you come over and be my promptee, right? So we're just going to work on this one singular bear.
Please put the bear in the dish.
Okay?
Please put the bear in the dish.
All right, cool. So he represented the vocal instruction. Okay? So that's exactly what you're supposed to do. So now, when he says put the bear into the dish, what am I going to do?
Put the bear into the dish.
Right, so he did that correctly. So he represented the cue. So in response to that cue, I'm going to do what's worked. Right? So now, when you physically prompt me, don't give that cue again. Okay?
Okay.
Okay?
So, please put the bear in the dish.
All right, cool. So now what's going to happen when he says put the bear in the dish? Well, what's probably going to happen is
You're just gonna...
I'm going to make him do a little jump first. All right? Because the cue of that, I did this independently and then this prompted.
Right.
So put the bear into the dish does not inherently mean anything. Okay? But what I've learned it means is I do this, then I get reinforcement.
That was easy.
Right? Then that behavior gets reinforced. Right? So when you're giving error correction, be very careful about how you're correcting it. Okay? So the way you did it was absolutely perfect, where you kind of wait a second and then you present the cue again, and then while prompting. Okay? Clearly you've done this before. That's perfect. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so during prompting sequences, briefly remove instruction and present again, leading with the prompt, and of course giving that instruction again. Okay, so I didn't just pick up, put down, and then he prompted me to put it in there. Put up, put down. He waited, presented instruction again while simultaneously giving a prompt. Okay. So when doing chaining, or during a chaining sequence, we want to backstep, right? Because what is the cue to move to the next step?
The step before.
The step before, perfect. So the cue to move to yellow bears is the completion of blue bears. So if I don't do yellow bears correctly, I dump the blue bears out, and then redo that step, right? Because I need to respond appropriately to the cue. So think about, this is a series of steps.
Right.
But really, when I've learned all of these all together, the whole thing is one response.
Right.
So in order for this behavior to be reinforced, I would need to do it independently. So when I finish, you'd want to represent it. So that way I can do it independently. And only when I do it independently, that's when reinforcement happens for that behavior. Right? Because if I can take shortcuts and not really pay attention and sort and still get an awesome thing, why would I bother to concentrate and do it correctly?
Right.
I can just do whatever, you're going to correct me, and man, I get to sit down and watch a movie anyways, right? But if I do it correctly, I don't have to do it again, right, for independence, and I get my movie more quickly. Cool? So some last tips, kind of tie today's training into a nice neat bow. So follow teaching plans, practice these goals often, provide lots of reinforcement during teaching sessions, and try to end on successful moments or lessons.
We wanted to spend a few minutes maybe giving you a final chance, not final, but for Victor today, any questions that you might have.
Yeah, any other questions?
Yeah, any like tips for like newbies like us? Like, what is like a common mistake or like assumption that we get as as like we go into this?
Communication consistency, follow teaching plans. If you have an idea, bring it up, you know? And one of the, you know, the kind of overarching thing that I kind of always say, and I say it toward the beginning, is do not subject anybody with disabilities to the tyranny of lowered expectations. The second that we expect less of them, we treat them differently.
Self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Exactly, yeah. There's actually like kind of a Pygmalion effect that's been performed by researchers where our expectations of a learner influence their performance. Because if we don't expect much from them, then we don't actually work on them as much. Whereas if we expect a lot from people, we end up working a lot harder to make sure that they fulfill the expectations that we've set for them.
They perform up to or down to your expectations.
Exactly.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love for you to take a few minutes and talk about Brandon. You know, your experience with him, just personally, any kind of insights that you could provide these guys that into him as a person, not so much, you know, the methodology but just things you've learned about him that you think would be helpful.
Right. So one of the great things about him, and that's going to be an asset, and possibly, you know, not a liability per se, but he's
challenge.
Yeah, definitely a challenge. Yeah, is his ability to detect when those expectations are lowered. So he can tell when you're not making him perform this task completely independently. He knows when he can kind of like poke and prod and get away with not performing a task completely. Yeah, and one of the most crucial parts of this is that initial interaction with him. So letting him know that you're awesome, that you're going to bring a bunch of awesome things with you, and that when you're asking him to do something, you're going to follow through. And that initial response from him will determine whether or not he's going to be persistent with you, or whether or not you were going to be able to get a lot from him, and whether or not you're going to be able to work on skills effectively, whether or not you're going to be able to get him being more independent, really. So if you let him slide early on, it's not going to bode well. You're going to have to work really hard in order to get back to square one after that. Right. Whereas alternatively, if you stand your ground in the beginning, and it sounds like we're going to war or something like that, but if you're firm, if you associate yourself with, I'm going to follow through with expectations of you. You're going to complete your goals with me, you know, but it's also going to be really rewarding, right? So that's why it's important to hold him to a high standard, while at the same time bring a lot of awesome stuff with you, and make sure that we're being mindful of the way that we're presenting instruction. Remember that behavioral momentum piece, that we're presenting instruction in such a way that maybe breaks up large tasks into smaller ones, so that way he's regularly contacting reinforcement. So the trick is to expect a lot from him, while still being flexible enough that when you're noticing that he's a little bit on edge today, right? Don't push him like you would on days where he's in a really great mood, because then you're just going to end up bringing about problem behavior that eventually you're going to have to reinforce. Right? So flexible, but still really have good troubleshooting skills. Be analytic. Think about what's going on. Be critical.
It's I think with Brandon, I think the issue is this kind of balance between liking you and trusting you and respecting you, all of those things. And so, you know, these guys often will talk about instructional control. I mean, Brandon is so radically different for different people. And there are some people that he can be, you know, having a really bad time, and then somebody that has created that relationship and has the respect, and he almost will salute. I mean, you can see a radical difference, right, Victor? I mean, it's the people make a huge difference for him, and so that's why we're so focused on getting ready and getting to know him and getting to that point of respect and trust. Because anything else? Well, Victor, thank you. You are terrific, absolutely terrific. Yeah, thank you, and thank you guys. You guys are the best. Really, I feel validated. You know that I made good choices.
Really great group.
Yeah, really nice group. So thank you all very much.